The whole chaos unfolded inside a sweaty company office. Taikai Arima was still stuck in the office after hours, sprinting to slam his work done before the last train left, because Kiichi had already planned to head back on time. He should have swung by the cat cafe and then headed home, but this work derailed everything and wrecked his schedule. Takai was a 28-year-old salaryman, and lately the delays and extra work had started crushing his days at the office. So he ditched the stress and made it a routine, heading to the cat cafe where he finally feels safe, hanging out and cuddling those fluffy little troublemakers. He finally slammed the work shut just a few minutes before the train time. So Taikai bolted through a shortcut at full speed, desperate to make it there on time. Then his gaze locked onto a gorgeous cat strolling around like it owned the place. Watching Teji light up, feeling lucky as could be. Then the cat strutted across the zebra crossing, and right as it did, a truck came roaring in at full speed. Taikai didn't hesitate for a heartbeat. He shot forward to save the cat, but the crash that followed stole his life. But after just a few heartbeats, Taikai finally clawed his way back to consciousness and jolted awake to the sight of a cozy house with a warm table waiting for him. He stared around, confused. This didn't look like a hospital at all. Then his doubts vanished the second a cat crawled out of the table. It was the exact same cat he'd risked everything to save. Safe, and Taikai sighed in relief when he finally saw it was safe. Then boom, out of nowhere the cat started floating in the air, a hollow in its head glowing, and it greeted Taikai with a creepy smile. She offered Taikai a few deep words of gratitude for stepping in to help her. But Taikai couldn't make heads or tails of what kind of mess this was. The cat told Taikai she wasn't just some stray, she was a cat god, and even though she didn't need saving, she still thanked him for stepping in and paying with his own life. Taikai couldn't wrap his head around any of it, especially the part where he was dead, and Cat God made it crystal clear again. Yep, he really died. But she still walked into the afterlife to meet him, because she'd heard, from the cats he loved in that cafe, just how crazy he was about them. Taikai couldn't believe it. His obsession with cats finally hit the ultimate level, right up to Cat God itself. So the Cat God confessed she couldn't stand to watch someone as gentle as him get killed. Then she offered him a way out, jump to another world if he wanted to. Teji totally didn't understand what she was talking about at first. First, she told her it'd feel like slipping into a whole new world, nothing like Earth. But Taichi couldn't shake the fear that his stamina was terrible, so he felt like he didn't stand a chance in that other world, until the cat god laughed it off and promised she'd give him the strength he'd need to live. Taichi breathed out in relief, took the cat god's offer right away, and then she leaned in and asked how he wanted to live in the other world. Taichi couldn't stop imagining it, becoming an adventurer with swords and magic to tear through monsters, or wishing for something totally different. So he pushed the idea away. He wasn't about to sign up for a job that meant constant fighting, and he definitely didn't want some shady place either. But he also refused to waste his second life just sitting around, and that's how the long debate over his next step started. After all those thoughts about his second, Taichi finally snapped with a brilliant plan, opening his very own cat cafe in another world. Taichi's love for her kind hits the cat god so hard she breaks down in tears. So she handed him powers on purpose, helping him turn that idea into a roaring cat cafe. She handed him the tamer powers, basically a whole job built for one thing, taming monsters. So Taichi could finally tame those cat-like monsters, and you'd swear they were all fluffy to the core. Taichi was totally ready to tame those fluffy monsters, so when the chance came up, he practically jumped at the offer to become a tamer. The cat god even handed him every tamer skill, then winked at him and said, "Just open status and chant Taichi anytime." And right after that, she shoved a bag into his hands too. When Taichi popped it open, the inside looked nothing like he'd imagined. The cat god leaned in and said this magic bag could swallow an endless amount of anything you shoved into it. Time seemed to freeze inside that bag so he could squeeze every second out of it. She stuffed it with food, cash, and every other thing she figured he'd need. Taichi grabbed the bag, checked it once, and right out of nowhere a window popped up, flashing a list of what was inside, and it absolutely startled him. Then he peered into the bag, jerky, black bread, and water, and shot the cat god a question. What did food taste like in the other world? She shot back that the flavors weren't much different from Japan, and yep, some monsters even ended up in the ingredients, but still, when it came to variety, they had nowhere near what Japan offered. It sparked her to hit Taichi with some sharper skills, then Taichi got them, nodded, and thanked her. She grabbed him right as she got ready to send him straight to the other world. She hit Taichi up again, thanking him like, "Seriously, you saved my life back then." And he grinned, relieved beyond words that she made it out safe in the end. Right after that, Taichi got yanked through a portal, and dumped into a brand new world. And just like that, boom, he found himself dropped into the middle of a thick, choking forest, with nothing but trees stretching everywhere. He remembered meeting the cat god, and next thing he knew, she was sending him into this world, like a fancy manga panel had jumped off the page. Now he tore through his options, asking what he could do and what he had to do next, and when the memory hit, he realized his job skill was tamer. And yeah, he felt a little embarrassed after getting it exactly the way he wanted. Still, he couldn't hide how pumped he was to finally see what he could do. Next, he popped open his status and started scanning every skill he'd earned, more than a dozen just in his class alone, plus special ones for language, insight, imagination, and even shopping, and then Keiichi spotted an ability merit sitting there too. It's pointing to the one every fluffy adores. And yep, every level of that skill was maxed out, so Taikai could tame even dragons like they were tame pets. Then boom, something dark slid over his face, and when he whipped around, a dragon filled his world. 20 times his size, all jagged claws and brutal horns. It didn't hesitate for a second. This thing had already marked Taikai as its next meal. And the very first thing Taikai did was bolt, run for his life. As he sprinted with everything he had, the dragon blasted him with a flamethrower in a split-second burst. Taikai's nerves spiked. He hoped his taming would work on this dragon, but the moment he imagined it, panic hit. Once a dragon was tamed, what was he even supposed to do? Because he didn't want a dragon cafe, he wanted a fluffy one. Right out of nowhere, something lunged in from behind the dragon. Turns out it was another deadly monster, clamped its jaws at the dragon's neck and crunched it down to nothing. Taikai couldn't believe what he just saw, and the shock hit him like a punch. But just then, that mysterious beast snapped into awareness and zeroed in on Taikai's presence. Taichi saw him charge straight at him to hunt him down, and pure terror hit. There was no choice left. So he didn't hesitate. He instantly unleashed the taming skill on that mysterious wolf-like beast. Right in that raw moment, Taikai flashed back on his whole life, because all he'd really done so far was grind at a brutal black company with nothing else to hold on to. Then he ducked into a cat cafe, chasing instant peace by cuddling the fluffiest little cats he could find. Cats, he loved feeding them, and watching their little faces lit up his whole day, so he'd squeeze in as much time with them as he could whenever he got a chance. Plus, he had cat photos on his phone that were so ridiculously cute he just had to post them. Takai's love for those cats spread fast. Before long, the cats couldn't resist hanging around and playing with him too. That whole life before he died made him famous with the cats, and it's what lit the spark for him to build a cozy, fluffy cafe in peace. But then reality kicked in hard, and he ended up unleashing his taming on a fluffy, wolf-like beast that was roughly 2 meters long. Takai couldn't stop worrying. Using the Hammerman impulse might have gotten him in serious trouble. And then it hit him, he's got a conqueror skill too, so he can just talk it out and settle this. Suddenly the dangerous beast roared, and Haikai couldn't believe it. This beast that called himself his offender was acting like a tamer, was enough to get him under control. Haikai was still baffled by how it was thinking, but he couldn't deny one thing: he was actually able to talk to it. Fenrir kept bragging that he'd one-shot a dragon, but now he was getting tamed, by a human of all people, and Taikai just gave an awkward little smile, not knowing what to say. Then it hit him, if he undid the hold right now, would he finally be safe? Right then he spotted his fender's tail whipping right up close, wagging like crazy, and so fluffy it practically begged to be petted. Takai couldn't thank fate enough. He bowed to the cat god and prayed his thanks, and then he finally asked Fenrir the right way: "Would you be my familiar?" Fenrir shot Taichi a question: "Do you really want me, the lone warrior Fenrir, as your familiar?" And Taichi nodded without hesitation. Then Fenrir clocked how hopelessly weak Taichi looked. Taikai had to stick close to him. If he didn't, the other monsters would tear him apart for a meal, and Taikai was relieved he finally got Fenrir on his side. Next, he stepped forward and introduced himself. And the Fender lined in and demanded Taichi give him a name. And when you look at that confused, the Fenrir breaks it down. When a monster gets tamed, the tamer has to slap a name on them like, obvious once you hear it. Peiki didn't even know it could happen until this moment, so he threw in the towel, then turned around and thanked the Fenrir for showing him the truth, because he was still a rookie tamer, and it was his very first familiar. Fenrir froze in shock. He figured Taichi had to be an expert, but still, he pressed Taichi anyway, demanding that he give him a name. Takai started thinking, and realized he couldn't just hand a lone warrior monster his cute little nickname like it was nothing. After mulling it over, a name finally hit his mind, so he grabbed his Fenrir and called him Luke. Taikai told him that Luke basically means light, and since Luke had this ridiculously beautiful, shiny coat, he thought it fit perfectly. Luke stared at his fluffy fur, like it was the most important thing in the world, and smiled like he actually loved it. Taichi couldn't help but think it was ridiculously cute. Fenrir roared out his name, Luke, and it fit him perfectly. Then Taikai stepped forward and begged Luke to look after him from that day on. Taichi reached out and brushed Luke's fur, then his hand instantly sank right into it. That blindsided him completely. Taichi had never, ever found anything softer than this, so it basically made him perfect to take in his very first fluffy familiar. Alright, let me give you the rundown of this crazy world first. This forest sat in the southeast of Lorum in the kingdom of Shulkech, and it was walled off with a barrier, because terrifying monsters lurked inside. Barriers shot up everywhere, and a swarm of mages kept stacking spell after spell, locking the monsters inside the forest so no disaster could ever break out. When a monster finally smashes through the barrier, the top-ranked adventurers get thrown into the mission to hunt it down and put it down for good. But some monsters were just on a whole other level, so brutal that even the barrier couldn't hold them back, and that's why the proud lone warrior Fenrir, the only one of his kind, became a legend all on his own. Before he ever met Taichi, Luke spent that day drifting through the forest under blazing sunlight, just like it was any normal morning, until everything was about to change. Every time Luke headed to that watering spot where monsters always showed up, the monsters would panic and scatter in fear. And sprint off in panic, because that danger radiated off him like a storm, too much power, too much presence for them to even stay near the deeper parts of the forest. But Luke finally got used to the loneliness, started calling himself the lone warrior Fenrir, and that's when he slipped into the water to bathe. Water splashed out as he whipped his body around, shaking off every last drop to dry himself. Luke stared at his reflection in the water, grinned, and told himself he looked great again, soaking up the moment by keeping himself as company. Then Luke's stomach rumbled like thunder, and he knew it was go time. He had to track down his next prey. He was hunting for a dragon to snack on today, so he darted across the tree branches, tiptoeing from perch to perch in the hopes of spotting one. On the way, Luke kept replaying a rumor he'd heard. Some humans could cook meals so good they'd blow your mind, but he never thought he'd taste one himself, not as a lone Fenrir. Then out of nowhere, he spotted a huge dragon sitting perfectly for lunch, and Luke slammed straight into its neck like a hunter on fire. That's when Luke felt a human out there, and it freaked him out while he was stalking for prey, but out of nowhere, Taichi swooped in and tamed him. Luke couldn't wrap his head around how Taichi got tamed so easily, and that only proved how terrifyingly strong he was, like there was some weird aura wrapped around him, the kind of guy you don't leave alone. Since Taichi looked insanely talented, Luke figured he didn't mind becoming his familiar. And when he realized Taichi could use the converse skill too, Luke's jaw dropped in pure amazement. Still, Taichi managed to hook Luke's attention like a magnet. The first time Taichi, his life someone, didn't bolt from him like every other monster did in pure terror, Luke immediately saw it. That courage hit him fast, and he decided Taichi was 100 times better than those scared, running monsters. He hit that loop again, and somehow he still expected to finally get a name. That was the moment when Taichi leaned in and demanded he become his familiar. Luke nodded in agreement and told Taichi, "Give me a name," and with that name, the legendary lone warrior Fenrir. Luke finally got his name, but when Taichi kept pawing at his fur, surprise curdled into irritation, and Luke snapped, asking just how much longer he planned to keep touching it. Back when he was still a noble Fenrir, the stuff of legends, untouchable by anyone, Taichi finally managed to apologize. Then he told Luke he was heading to the city and demanded to know the way. Luke shot back, "Yeah, I've got this, obviously I know." But disappointment hit him hard, and he snapped, "Why does Tesh know the way to a human city if he's human too?" And Tesh started to think. He just sat there, replaying it in his head. Would Luke actually believe him if he told him Teji came from another world? Luke was his first familiar, so he couldn't hide the truth. So Luke asked what was going on, and he finally blurted out that he had something huge to tell him. And after he poured out every detail of his whole situation to Luke, Luke finally got it. Everything that used to twist his brain into knots suddenly clicked into place the moment he learned the truth. He told Taiki this forest sat way back in the deepest wilderness, so deep that humans almost never set foot here, and that getting inside would mean pushing through a barrier first. With the danger staring him in the face, Taikai ditched the armor and went in barely dressed, and it hit him fast. He was stuck right in the middle of a nasty, unsafe forest, so he had to reach the city ASAP. He told Luke he wanted to hit the city, but fear gnawed at him. Was it really safe for a big monster like Luke to go with him? Luke didn't even flinch. He shrank his size to just a bit smaller than a human. Taikai was ready to sprint into the city, and then Luke snapped, "Hold on." Taichi realized he still hadn't even eaten the dragon he'd hunted, so he nodded and told him to go on. While Luke chowed down, Takai whipped out a tough little detector just to get a clear look at Luke eating the dragon meat raw. Then it hit him, he had real cooking skills after all. So he tried to cook dragon steak with it, but it totally backfired, because he didn't have the magic grass he needed to make the dragon meat work. Luke's eyes lit up and he blurted to Taichai, "Can I use your cooking skills?" Even though he was a total beginner, because everyone said food made with Tamer's technique tasted absolutely incredible. Taichi shot back that if he had magic grass, he could whip up a steak like it was nothing. For the missing grass, Taikai leaned on his one-of-a-kind insight and tracked down usable stuff fast: magic grass, an enchanted mushroom, and a rare flower. Taikai sprinted off to gather the magic grass, while Luke kept grilling him, demanding to know why the heck they even needed it. Taichai cooked up dragon steak using magic grass and real dragon meat. The steak looked absolutely mouthwatering, so he offered it to Luke, and the second Luke sniffed that irresistible smell, he dove in and started chowing down. And after he took that first bite, Luke went quiet for a few minutes, then finally said the food was unreal, so insanely better than eating raw. Luke dug into the dragon meat that Taichai's cooking skill cooked up, and once he finished, he leaned in and told him to cook another dragon steak soon, because he wanted those dragon skin and nails ready to be used. He even said they could sell the materials and make some real money for sure. Taichai just asked if that was okay. Luke shot back that money mattered for humans, and since he was brand new to this world, he'd need it too, and Taichi nodded along, fully convinced. He took the materials right away, grateful to have a chance, even as he secretly worried they might not sell. Still, he went ahead and put them on display. Shoved every last ingredient into the magic bag. Taikai was convinced this was the ticket. His dreams were going to burst to life way sooner than he expected, and he couldn't afford to wait, because the fluffy cafe needed money to keep running. Now there was only one move left: head for the city. So Taikai tore through the forest at breakneck speed, clinging to Luke's back as they blasted onward. And over he kept hounding Taichai, "Hold on tight, don't let go." Luke was struggling to stay on the saddle as the speed screamed forward. It snapped his memory. 2 hours back, he'd asked Luke how long it'd take to reach the city, and Luke told him it would only be a few hours. Hours, and still they kept walking, even after the miles started to blur. Taichai couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't even getting closer to the city, because his pace was painfully slow. So he ended up hopping on Luke, because he never guessed the city was this far. If it took Luke a few hours, then he was in trouble. On the move, Luke shot Taichai a warning. There was a monster lurking nearby. And just as he was about to claim it, the loot went flying, and in one brutal shot, it dropped the massive bird monster cold. Then he leaned in and told Taichai to shove that monster's body into his bag for those valuable materials. They pressed on like this as Luke wiped out every single thing that tried to get in their way. After just a few hours, Luke and the others finally pushed through and made it to the city, and Luke was. To Taichai, this city wasn't just big, it was Loram, the kingdom of Shulkak's second largest city. Taichai stood there, staring at a city teeming with people, like the whole world was buzzing around him. And just like that, out by the borders, people were bent over their fields, hustling to make it through the day. Everything felt calm and steady, and Luke said this city was packed with adventurers and soldiers, sitting on a great lookout spot, plus the monsters barely even bother attacking. Taichai felt a rush of relief knowing all of this, especially how many people mattered, was the key to opening his cozy fluffy cafe, so he headed into the city with one mission: hunt down a place to rest first, while Luke mocked him for calling it weak. But right when they were still standing at the gates, the guard stared at Luke and said, "You really got a big wolf with you, are you sure it won't turn dangerous?" Taikai shot back, "It's safe." And once he pulled it off, everything was suddenly fine, because the guard saw no reason to raise a single issue. He didn't mind letting Taichai into the city, but first he had to show that ID, and once Taichai heard he needed it, he got completely lost. And there was no way his Japanese driver's license would work here, so the soldier demanded to know why he didn't bring one. So Taichai would need 5,000 shells just to get into the city, and for a moment, he hurriedly checked whether he had the money. So you dig through what the cat gods handed him, and boom, he finds a wallet in the pile. Taikai dug up 3 massive silver coins tucked inside the coin, but he had no clue what kind of fortune they might be worth. He grilled Luke about it, and Luke just stared back, because he had absolutely no clue about their worth either. So Taikai had no choice. He fired that question at the soldier as a final shot, then acted clueless, watching his every move as the soldier's eyes snapped to the huge silver coins. He promised he'd run off and get change. Taikai flashed a grin and asked, "These good enough?" And when the guard nodded, he grabbed 5,000 shells without hesitation. and he passed them to Taichai as change for a single silver coin, only it turns out that one coin was a whopping 5,000 shells. And besides that, Taikai couldn't help but ask the soldier where he could find a good, comfy place to stay. The soldier answered with quiet certainty. Taichai should head straight, then turn left at the Adventurers Guild. There he'd find a crescent moon shop called in, where one night costs 4,000 shells and the food is ridiculously good. Taikai heard that and couldn't resist. He had to see it firsthand, thinking that even a kid from this world was worth every bit as much as a single yen in Japan. Then he hurried back to Luke, matched the directions step by step, and kept his eyes sharp on everything around him, hunting for any clue he'd need before he opened the cafe. Later, Taikai prowled through the city, soaking it all in, and everything felt totally fine. Until he finally clocked it. Everyone's stars were pinned right on him, like Luke's huge, monstrous wolf presence had taken over the whole city. Taichi stared at all those stores and realized he'd better grab some clothes too, while Lu leaned in and told him the right equipment had to be his top priority. Taikai shot back that he'd rather have a real jacket. Cold winds were biting him all the way down Luke's back, and Luke's response was calling him fragile. And they tore across the land until they finally slammed into that crescent moon-shaped place. But they never saw it coming. The innkeeper snapped them away, refusing entry just because that huge familiar belonged to Luke. Luke straight up told Taichai to back off, shut the door on him, and basically left him hanging, while Taichai stood there like, "So what do we do now?" And Luke was fuming because it looked like he still wasn't getting anywhere to rest. Taichai decided to shake up his plan, then headed for the Adventurers Guild to find some work, until his eyes caught a signboard that read, Tamers Guild. Taikai decided they could hunt down a spot that actually lets big familiars in, so he figured it was worth checking out for a while. So Taikai marched up to the Tamers Guild. On the outside, it looked like any boring building you'd ignore. Taikai barged into the guild, but even after he hauled out his gratings, still nothing. He scanned the place and found nobody, then even the main hall sat in deep darkness. Like the whole place had gone ghost quiet, then bright energy snapped it back to life when a cheerful receptionist, Shelty, greeted him with a big smile. She leaned in and asked Taichai if this familiar was a wolf king. Taichai said his name, then revealed the truth. Luke wasn't a wolf king at all, he was a Fenrir. But she just laughed it off, saying there was no way. Fenrirs hadn't been seen for a few hundred years, and now they were nothing but monsters from old stories. Yet Taichi had no idea how real that legend was. Now it clicked for him, so that's why the soldier looked stunned earlier and blurted out Luke a wolf king, too. For the moment he decided it wasn't worth nitpicking, so Subteki went on to explain that he'd just arrived from the countryside, and he still didn't have an ID, and Shelty told him to register with the Tamers Guild, because once he did, his registration card would count as his ID right away. Taichi grinned because he totally pulled the wool over her eyes, and right then he declared, "No doubt, I'm registering with the guild." Shelty shoved a form in front of him and demanded he fill in the details to get registered. Taichai scribbled in his name, age, and the details of his familiar, Luke. He even tagged him as a wolf king, and then Luke snapped, annoyed to the bone, "What do you even mean by wolf king?" Back then he loathed being thrown into the ring with those puny monsters because he was a proud Fenrir. Taichi snapped that there was no getting around it, since Fenrir were the monsters of legends, and right now, they were all that mattered. And Luke just realized in that instant how legendary his presence was here. He grinned at the news, practically bragging, "If that's true, then there's nothing to do about it. Fenrir and guys like me are downright legendary." Shelty told him to sprinkle in his skills if he wanted, but it was optional, because plenty of people didn't want others digging into what they could do, and she also made him write down any goal he had. And he said there'd be tons of jobs where he'd fight alongside his familiars. Tesh caught the meaning in an instant and started thinking about what that would mean. He started writing down skills like cooking and other everyday stuff, but he kept his truly unique skills locked away because everyone could tell they were basically cheating. He doubled down on healing and curing, then, with his sights set, he scribbled out a plan to open a cozy little spot called Fluffy Cafe. Shelty scanned his skills and nearly couldn't believe it, because he had recovery skills, the kind that almost never showed up in Tamers. And when Taikai talked about his dream to open a cafe, he didn't dress it up. He said he sucked at fighting, so he wanted to win people over with food instead. But he made it crystal clear, this wouldn't be a run-of-the-mill cafe, because customers would actually get to hang out with fluffy monsters. Shelty stared at Taichai like he'd just said something weird when he brought up fluffy, and that's when Taichai realized, this world doesn't even know what fluffy means. So then he'd have to plant that idea in this world himself, starting with his own cafe, Fluffy, and honestly, who wouldn't feel pure joy the moment they're surrounded by all that fluff? Then Shelty finally rolled up with Taikai's very own adventurer's card, proof he was officially tied to the Tamers Guild, It spelled out his name, Taikai, stamped his rank, F, and listed the branch, Lorem. She said it's more than a key, it's his ID too, so he'd better not lose it, because he can swipe it in other places as well. Shelty told him to make sure he put some magic into it too, because this was about something important. She needed that card to hit harder. Taichi tried it and bam, the card lit up with details. Before he could even ask Shelty what they meant, she snapped, "Don't show me that." And this was the official info that pops up out of nowhere and vanishes the second he tries to cast magic. Taichi shot her a question about what the feature was for, and she told him it was meant to act like a referral for clients. Plus, it could help reveal whether someone had committed a crime, or even prove to a client that the person was trustworthy. She promised him that no single place could bully him into sharing this info, and told him he could simply check the request board in the back for the jobs. Taikai realized the people weren't just asking, they were demanding tamers treat animals like real caretakers. Taikai admitted he couldn't hold his own in a fight, so he decided to play it smart, wait it out, and open a cafe instead. Shelty figured it was a total waste for a guy like him to come with a wolf just to dodge combat quests, yet Taikai still wouldn't risk his life. Then he asked her if there was anywhere he could crash with Luke, since the inn had turned him away, and because Luke was big, he figured she'd know where they could still get him taken in. So she told him the Tamers Guild could set them up with a room 2,000 shells a night, cheaper than any inn, and Taikai instantly lit up and said he wanted a place to stay right here. Shelty asked how long he planned to stick around, and he shot back, "Just 5 days for now, then I'll have to find a job." Shelty marched him to his room, and halfway there, Taikai spotted an open garden packed with dogs. Taichai offered Luke a spot to play with them, but Luke snapped back that he wasn't about to get lumped in with those dogs. Luke laughed it off. No way a beast like Fenrir would ever touch a ball like that, but Taichai could read him like a book. Luke clearly wanted to play, and he'd do it the moment Taichai got him one. Shelty told him that as long as he stayed in the guild, he could use the courtyard here with 0 restrictions. Taikai thanked her, and she waved it off, saying it was no big deal, because he was an important member of their guild, and if he ever needed anything, he should just come ask her. But right then, Taikai fired off a brutal question. Why were there barely any tamers here at all? Shelty insisted there probably weren't many, but still, it was wild to see tamers at all. Because a tamer fights like a duet with his comrade, covering each other's weak spots. Taming stronger monsters isn't easy, so it's seen as an advanced profession. Taikai saw it the exact same way, and relief hit her hard. Finally, someone understood her. And she said that was exactly why she was relieved Taikai decided to tag along. Then she begged him to stick with them as long as he could, and Taikai just nodded like, "Got it." Then he leaned in and asked Shelty if the materials were bought right here. She answered that it's the Adventurers Guild that handles all the buying, while every occupational guild only snags the exact materials their own jobs demand. Taichai got it instantly, then bolted to the Adventurers Guild, massive, way bigger than any other guild in the whole city. Dozens of adventurers packed themselves behind the receptionist counter, all buzzing with excitement and waiting for their next quest. Taichai had no idea this place would be packed wall-to-wall with humans, and that annoyed Luke to no end, so Taichai queued up at reception, and when his turn finally hit, the receptionist greeted him and ordered him to slap the materials on the counter so she could assess them. Taichai blurted that he couldn't haul that many materials onto this counter, and the receptionist snapped in surprise, because Taichai was totally empty-handed right now. Taichai grinned and said, "Don't worry, I've got them stashed in my magic bag." The receptionist shot him a shocked look and admitted it was a rare one. Turns out Taichai had no idea what he was carrying. She told him to follow her, and Taichai instantly realized this bag was even rarer than he'd ever imagined. They shoved Taikai straight to the dismantling squad, where the leader barked for every material to hit the table, and Taikai charged in, pulling out the dragon first, then dropping monster after monster onto that table as the squad stared. That giant table even felt way too small. When the dismantling squad showed up, they couldn't believe it. Not just monsters everywhere, but heavy hitters like dragons, red wolves, fangs, and even platinum golems. Taichi was seriously relieved. He didn't haul in every monster Luke had wiped out on the road. The next day, the dismantling squad checked the monster bodies and froze. Every one of them had been dropped by the exact same brutal blow. They demanded to know if Taikai was behind it all, and Taikai just grinned and said, "Nope, it was my familiar." Which made the guys swear he had to be insanely high-ranked to command a tamer that strong, until they realized Taichai was only F rank at the moment. Then the guys grilled him about what kind of monster Taikai's familiar was, and when he said it was a wolf king, Luke snapped with rage. The Taichai pet went after the ropes, hit fur, and told them to stay patient because they had to sell those materials. Luke totally melted once they praised him like that. And the dismantling crew was blown away. Luke had a wolf king that actually listens to him, and once that was settled, they dove straight into the work to tear down the monsters and nail down an estimated price. Taechai stood outside, waiting with bated breath for the dismantling to begin. As soon as it was finished, the receptionist hurried over, shot him an apology for the delay, then started hitting him with the prices, right there. She handed him a pile of bags stuffed with golden coins and told him the 3 red wolves were sold for 100,000 shells each, the 1 wildfowl went for 130,000 shells, and the platinum golem cost a whopping 3 million shells by itself, bringing the grand total to 3,430,000 shells. He stared in disbelief at the mountain of money. Now he had more funding than he knew what to do with, and the receptionist, just out of curiosity, blurted if he was planning to grab equipment or something. Taichi leaned in and told her he wasn't joking. He's really planning to open a cafe called Asterisk Cafe Fluffy Asterisk Asterisk. She heard it, grinned, and sighed that it was a real shame. He didn't want to be an adventurer, after all, but she was still relieved he'd chosen the path of a strong tamer, since he'd be in town, and that alone was reassuring. Then she told him to make sure he stopped by the Commerce Guild later. If he really wanted to open his cafe, Taikai followed her advice and told him goodbye, promising she'd be thrilled to swing by once it opened. Then Taikai was over the moon about that, hurried back to the Tamers Guild, and Shelty greeted him, demanding to know whether he'd managed to sell the materials. Taikai nodded in agreement. He said he finally had the money to open the cafe, thanks to Luke's hard work, and the next day he'd head straight to the Commerce Guild, but first he needed to track down the perfect place for it. Shelty told him the Tamers Guild wasn't just jobs, it also owned properties, and she wanted to know if he was interested. And because tamers can summon those massive familiars, there are even special properties out on the outskirts of the city. Tesh's ears practically lit up the moment he heard it. Then he asked if he could take a look at those properties right then, and Shelty told him to come back tomorrow, early in the morning, because she'd be ready to line up a few for him. After that, Taichi bolted back to his room to call it a day, still buzzing because today's progress happened at lightning speed, until, right before he checked the properties. He shot over to the equipment store, and the dealer greeted him, until he froze in his tracks when Taikai's familiar face came into view. Taichi told the seller he could always set up that familiar wait outside if it was necessary, but the seller waved it off and said it was totally fine, so Taichi thanked him for looking out. Taichi glanced at the crazy awesome gear adventurers and soldiers use in battle, and then Luke straight up asked why he didn't just buy one if he liked it, until Taichi shot that down, saying it was too heavy for him, and Luke snapped that he was weak. Then Luke spotted something and jabbed his finger, calling out exactly which one it was. Pechai caught sight of that light jacket, soft as anything, and instantly grabbed it, while Luke pointed out that it looked way better than the plain clothes Pechai was stuck in right now. Taichi figured if Luke was going to be his wolf, his master had to at least try with his looks, so that pushed him to buy it. He walked up to the shopkeeper, and the guy froze, asking if Taichi was a tamer, because he'd never seen a wolf this huge in anyone's hands. Taichi grinned and told him Luke was his important partner. And from the look on the shopkeeper's face, he immediately clocked Luke as the Wolf King, something so rare these days it felt unreal. Days passed and he couldn't help admiring the sharp coat on Luke too, and once Luke heard that, it hit him right in the chest, because compliments always made him feel good. Since they were already chatting about coats, Taikai jumped on the moment and told the shopkeeper he was planning to open a cafe where people could hang out with fluffy monsters, and the shopkeeper's eyes lit up, saying he'd come try it the second it opens. Taikai walked away, genuinely relieved it went so well. He changed into some regular clothes, then headed back to talk about the property, right after he finally reached Tamer's Guild. Shelty greeted him with a bright good morning, and Taichi leaned in, asking if she'd found any spots for him. She grinned and said she'd snagged a great one right near the Tamer's Guild. And yeah, it was a loud, busy zone, perfect for a cafe, but Taikai wanted something calmer, so Shelting Neck pointed him to the best spot, a relaxed area right on the edge of the city, near the outer wall. Taichi snapped his eyes up at the house map like it was about to reveal a secret. He adored the house layout, clocked that the property came with a garden and a full-on backyard, perfect for training familiars, and even discovered it had a well right there attached to the place. Tesh thought this was the perfect setup, until Shelty snapped that it was basically a monster buffet since it sat outside the wall, ready to get swarmed. Taichi figured that even if a monster crashed the party, Luke would wipe them out without breaking a sweat. So he promised everything would be fine. Luke was there. Then he asked to tour the property right now, and once they did, Shelty agreed to show it. Takai was led right up to it, beyond the walls, and the second he finally laid eyes on the property, he spotted the house with a backyard well waiting like a secret. That house looked unreal, and he loved the place the second he laid eyes on it, while Luke showed up, wandered around, and confirmed everything for Taichai. He swore the place was perfect, and Taikai's eyes lit up. He couldn't wait to buy it, so he hooked the offer and rushed him inside to show him the house. Taikai nodded and walked into the house, and the jaw-dropping design hit him like a thunderclap. Shelting explained that this place was built so well because it used to be a restaurant, back when the previous owner was even tamer, using his familiars to haul in resources, and Taikai instantly saw that as a huge win. Then Luke stepped in and realized the empty spot in the house was way too cramped for him. Luke challenged Taichai, asking if a noble Fenrir like him could truly be happy in a cramped little place like this, and Taichai shot back that back in his world, they had a saying, home is where you build it. So he was fully certain Luke would end up loving it. When Taichai heard that Luke got all shy and started nagging that Taichai was exhausting to be around, Taichai just saw him as Sundeer, all cold on the outside, soft on the inside, except Luke wasn't even a real person, so in the end it just meant he was a son. With that settled, Shelty swept him toward the second floor and revealed a whole living space waiting up there. Taichai totally loved that room. It matched his bedroom vibe perfectly. He pointed out the furniture looked a little outdated, but it didn't bother him one bit. Shelty then hit him with the real deal. Rent is 10,000 shells a month, and to buy this place outright, Taikai has to be at least a ranked E-tamer or higher. Taikai was cool with renting it for now and told her to get the papers ready. She practically cheered as she started, and just like that, everything was settled. And they should hurry back to the guild to wrap up the formalities. As they headed out, Taichi whipped a quick look back at the house. Back at the place as a whole, he finally felt it, like he'd inched one step closer to finishing his dream cafe fluff. Even though there was still a mile of dreams left for him to chase. Meanwhile, Amelia, the Adventure Guild's receptionist, sat there thinking, because day after day, her job kept throwing her one wild surprise after another. She nearly fell over when Taichai pulled out a Wolf King as his familiar. She was convinced it meant he was insanely talented, and she knew she had to run straight to the guildmaster and tell them. Master's voice had barely slipped in when she marched straight up to the guildmaster's office door, right as Taikai showed up. But at that exact moment, she couldn't find her anywhere in the office. Now that the guildmaster was back, she spilled every detail of what happened, and straight up demanded to know where he'd been when that high-ranking tamer came knocking. Himry, stunned by the report, couldn't believe there was a tamer out there who could tame a Wolf King. And she couldn't believe how insane it was to have a tamer that powerful right here in their city. Amelia said it out loud, because when the moment mattered, Himry simply vanished the second she was needed. Then Imre told Amelia she wasn't truly guildmaster material, since negotiations weren't her strong suit. But Amelia wasn't buying it for a second. Himry was pure talent, having mastered magic at a young age, clawing her way up to guildmaster, and even earning the title of Adventurer of Wisdom. Still, Henry insisted she wasn't meant for the admin grind, and Amelia, the receptionist, couldn't believe they were squandering someone with real talent. Henry admitted that having a Wolf King as a familiar sounded wild, but the real shock was hearing Amelia tell her to go ask that man to team up with the Adventurers Guild, because the monster materials he dropped off the other day were insanely high quality. Henry's face flickered, uncertainty hit him hard, and irritation burned over this whole mess. So she just slammed the door on the whole thing and said it was over right there, and when Amelia pushed, "Why?" Himry snapped back that she didn't want to drag that guy into the Adventurers Guild. The guild can only be thinking one thing: if they keep hounding him, he might end up leading the city, so they'd better stay okay with him just hanging around for now. Amelia agreed with the guild master and then hurried back to her work. Meanwhile, Emery wasn't spilling everything back then. She kept circling one brutal memory. Years ago, she'd faced a Wolf King, and it nearly broke her, because that thing was terrifying. So when she heard someone could tame it, she just couldn't shake it. They had to be headed toward a job no one else could handle, something as rare and dangerous as hers. She never thought a tough Wolf King guy could stay so calm about it. That felt downright weird, and now she can't stop wondering if she'll ever run into him in the city. If it all comes to that, she'd much rather face him as Himry the Adventurer than as Himry the Guildmaster, because as she stared out the window, she just knew they'd click. Now back to Taichai, his first day in the new house, and he couldn't stop smiling because they finally made it. He'd reached the place where he'd soon build his dream cafe, and Luke was right there when the monster stepped in she caught. Taichai caught up to him, thanked Luke like crazy for the huge help, and then Luke snapped at Taichai to stop grabbing him whenever he felt like it. But he secretly loved it, until Taichai started creeping in and sniffing him like it was nothing. Taichai told Luke to get their household stuff handled first, then Luke shot back, asking if he was planning to grab anything new. Takai shot back, "Sure, I can buy," but he had one more thing in mind first. he needed to test out one of his rare skills. Luke had never even heard of a skill called creation, until he realized it was basically the most convenient power imaginable. Taikai decided to go all in. He triggered the unique skill, and suddenly, a creation block slammed into his mind like a floating 3D image, one he could reshape however he wanted. Tesh imagined a low, round table for the shop center, with cat paw legs and a cozy vibe. Then he picked a solid, soft wood with a beautiful natural color, built the whole thing, and when he finished, the table appeared right before his eyes. Taichai finally cracked it. This creation power let him forge anything he could dream up in his head. Luke couldn't believe his eyes. Those crazy skills were real, and right after that, Taichai busted into the next phase, grabbing more items and pushing forward. And somehow ended up crafting a beanbag cushion, just so Luke could finally kick back and relax. He urged Luke to give it a shot, and Luke hesitated for a heartbeat before finally placing his paw on the beanbag. And somehow he ended up loving it so much that he flopped onto the beanbag, instantly thinking, wow, this is insanely soft. Taichi cranked out more tables, chairs, and cushions. Then he went even further, stacking up shelves and everything else he needed. Separations popping up in cat toys, like ball bits and other plush little soft toys. And on top of that, he installed a cat tower that towers right over the wall. And finally, he jammed a spiral staircase right on the table in the middle. Then he finished the house designs, throwing curtains on the windows, and by the time he was done, sunset was already rolling in when he got so locked in that time slipped away. Then he snapped, Luke, it's time to go. Luke didn't want to leave just yet, but Taicha shut that down fast. If they stayed, Shalti might start panicking, so he told her they'd head to the living room the next day. Then they slipped back to the Tamer's Guild. The next day, Taichai showed up and finished the living room, and Luke just couldn't believe how cramped it felt. But he let it slide the moment Luke got the beanbag, and Taichi couldn't stop smiling because Luke actually liked it. But right then, his face snapped from calm to confused, because the moment he recalled the most important piece, everything clicked into place. He said the cafe was there, but there wasn't a single signboard up yet. Luke shrugged it off until Taikai snapped, that's important. So Luke slammed into action, used creation magic, and crafted the cafe's signboard for Fluffy, a cozy healing spot open from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Everything finally looked perfect, so Taikai went and installed a doorbell, because this laid-back cafe wasn't ready to keep it blasting all day just yet. So the real question hit him hard. Could he start a business without permission? To find out, he marched to the Commerce Guild and asked Luke what he wanted to do, only for Luke to groan that going just to listen to explanations was the most boring thing ever. So yeah, he just plopped onto that beanbag and zonked out for a nap, and Taikai figured it was totally fine. So he headed into the city to handle more business, walked right up to the Commerce Guild, where the receptionist greeted him with a smile and demanded to know why he was there, and Taichi stepped forward to introduce himself. She talked to her about it. He'd come for permission to open a cafe where people could hang out with his familiars, and she couldn't wrap her head around why anyone would want to play with monsters. Taichi couldn't help but feel a punch of disappointment when nobody got what fluffiness even meant. First, she told them, yeah, we're monsters, but we're soft, fluffy, and super comforting to pet, and honestly, it was so soothing that humans needed that kind of comfort. The receptionist thought the idea of a fluffy cafe was hilarious, and with Taichi being a tamer, it was smooth sailing for him to take it over. She told her that any monster forced to work had to be registered with the Tamers Guild, and Peiki finally understood why. Then she shifted gears to the taxes, different rates depending on whether it was a private shop or a commercial one, and where it was located, and Taikai shot back that his was a private shop on the outskirts of town that he was leasing. She told him that if the shops were out on the outskirts, the tax would only be 5% of their total sales, and Taikai couldn't believe how generous that sounded. Now she pressed him, so when are you opening the cafe? Just like that, Taikai froze in stunned silence, totally unable to speak. And he realized there was still some prep work to do, so the receptionist told him to come back once the date was set, and the second Taikai got that news, he sprinted back to his place and blurted out loud, "We've got a huge problem." What? Luke demanded to know what kind of nightmare was so massive it yanked a lone Fenrir out of its sleep. Taikai shot back that they don't have enough fluffies to open the cafe. Luke barely blinked and brushed it off like it wasn't a big deal, but Taichai's worries spiraled because this was everything they needed. Then Luke leaned in and asked, why don't you just go out there and tame some monsters? You're the tamer, right? So Taikai rushed to the Tamers Guild and cornered Shelty, begging for answers about fluffy and friendly monsters. Shelty said, yeah, berry rabbits really do live in the southwest, but they're basically prized targets for fresh-faced adventurers. Taichai thanked her and immediately set off to verify it, sprinting off to track down Bari Rabbit. Luke said those berry rabbits were lightning-fast monsters, so how in the world was he supposed to catch them? Luke offered to run out and grab them, but the moment he pictured Nate Teichai refusing, rabbits, safety on the line, Luke knew that offer wasn't going anywhere. Then he heard something slithering through the grass, like it was circling closer. And when he finally looked over, there it was, a tiny, fluffy, cute little rabbit monster. Teichi couldn't help it. This monster was freakin' adorable, and one look was all it took for him to know it had to be the berry rabbit, and while Teichi was busy gushing over the rabbits. Luke couldn't believe it. Those berry rabbits were usually scared out of their wits, yet they strolled right up to Teichai like they owned the place, and Teichai figured it out instantly. His title, loved by all the fluffies working, was basically a cheat code, so everything fell into place and he ended up taming the berry rabbit. After Teichi tamed the berry rabbit, he couldn't stop thinking about calling it Marshmallow, white, soft, and ridiculously cute. He wondered if his converse skills could help him talk to Bari rabbits, but Luke cut in and said Bari rabbits weren't smart enough to speak yet, and if Taikai stayed patient, they'd learn to talk later. Teichai practically beamed, wrapped his arms around Luke, and praised him as super intelligent while petting that fluffy fur. Then Luke shot back, "Stop saying it so casually, because..." But he got cut off, and Taikai blurted out the rest, because Taikai was the only Fenrir left standing. Luke burst out laughing, and Teichai bragged that he'd memorized it, because he'd been hauling it around nonstop. Then Teichai's eyes caught even more berry rabbits charging toward him. So he tamed them one after another, breaking them down until each one finally fell under his control. He peered closer and spotted berry rabbits in every color under the sun, then named the white one Manaka and the brown one Karen. He figured this place was nothing but the best, packed with fluffy little creatures everywhere. But Luke's concern hit hard, and he fired back, asking exactly how many he planned to tame. Taikai messed up badly, then came rushing back to the city with a massive haul of berry rabbits. The guard at the gate went wide-eyed and demanded what the huge pack of berry rabbits was doing there. Teichi just smiled and said, "I'm their tamer," like that explained everything, and they were his familiars. So he figured there'd be no trouble at all as he flashed his guild card, and the soldier only nodded, "You're good, as long as you're familiar with each other." But one question kept gnawing at him. If the count of tamed monsters actually hinged on a single skill level, then what was he supposed to do with that? Taikai definitely didn't see this being asked. The soldier asking him made sense, but he couldn't just blurt out that his skills were basically infinite, so he shrugged and spun it. He could handle all those monsters because they were tiny and way too weak. The soldier swallowed his lie with a shaky pause, and Taikai shot back, "That's just how it is, since we can't even tell what our level really is." The soldier finally saw the truth in his own words, as Taikai slipped free of every question. He had questions for a while, but the moment he introduced his 10 berry rabbits to Shelty, the interrogation came back full force. She was stunned, packed with questions, and after everything finally settled, Luke told all the berry rabbits to. Teichi kept warning Luke to shoo those rabbits away from his beanbag, because they wouldn't budge for anything, and then Teichi finally clocked it. Luke was hogging the beanbag all to himself. With a fresh soak, the berry rabbits made one more friend, and they absolutely loved tossing around toys with everyone. Luke was over the moon, and those little berry rabbits were ridiculously adorable. And now it all came down to the menu. He'd seen how tea was treated like pure luxury in this world, but he refused to serve just any weak, lousy drink. So this time, he decided to whip out his next unique skill, shopping like it was a power move. That's how he could bargain with the cat god to run errands for him, grabbing about 5 items in one go. Teichai's eyes widened as a pen, and a sheet of paper materialized right in front of him. So he grabbed the powdered sencha and scribbled down what he needed, tossing in gray tea bags, instant coffee, cookies, and chocolates like it was all part of the plan. He slammed the list shut and couldn't stop wondering, did that missing list truly reach the cat god? While Taikai waited, he sketched out the cafe's menu from scratch, starting with green tea, coffee, and black tea, then stacking the sweets with cookies and chocolates. Right then, a bag slid onto the table behind him. He stared at the 2,800 shells on the bill and muttered, "How am I even supposed to pay for this?" So he whipped out the money, and just like that, it vanished into thin air. Teichi shot a huge thank you to the cat god. Because he knew deep down that no matter what hit him, someone had his back. From this day on, Taikai moved into the cafe, and Shelty was set to come pay him a visit later. But one nasty problem hit him hard. There wasn't a single bathroom, and in this world only the rich families get bathtubs. Now it was Teichai grabbing the reins, bathing Luke with his own hands, while Luke fought back, furious about getting scrubbed like that, and Teichai desperately tried to talk him down. When Taikai spotted the berry rabbits actually splashing and enjoying their bath, he told Luke, "See, they're being so good after all." Luke suddenly got shy, then tiptoed in and let the bath take him. No matter how much Taikai hated it, he still wouldn't let those newcomers steal the upper hand. Taikai found that about Luke so ridiculously cute. After he washed up Luke, he started dreaming up his own bathhouse, one with hot water, because winter was creeping in. Then it hit him, Shelty had said that even if he was just renting, he could still tweak the place a little, and nothing would stop him. So with his creation skill in hand, Teiichi ended up building his own detached bathhouse, and Luke asked what it was. Teiichi just grinned and said Luke was going to love it, then stepped right inside. Inside, the whole bathroom was spotless and perfectly arranged. It was built exactly how he dreamed it would be, and he didn't even care that he had no clue where those taps led, as long as the thing worked. Luke then leaned in and asked what he was planning to do with the hot water. And Teiichi first handed him the bathtub, then told him to jump in and try it the second it filled up with hot water. But before Luke could even take a sip, the berry rabbits leaped in, and that cocky little stunt lit a fire of rage in him. And lunged in instantly, refusing to let them take control. This sight adored Taikai. Luke let the scorching hot water hit his skin, and instant calm washed over him like he'd never felt peace before. Luke bragged that after a bath like this, even a noble Fenrir like him shouldn't drop his standards, and he was done with cold water for good. Teiichi practically cheered because he loved it too. Luke told Teiichi he was a strange guy, then, on Luke's request, ordered him to have a bath ready for him every single day, and Teiichi was totally unprepared for just how fired up Luke could get about it. And now, just like that, he climbed into the bath too, finally letting his tension melt away. Then Lu lunged straight into Taikai's bath, because it just wasn't fair that he got the big one all to himself. Luke had it way better this time. Like, he leaned into the relaxation so hard it actually ended up offending him, and Teiichi just knew he was having a blast. Right after the bath was finally over, He swung open the cafe door and told Marshmallow, "You're the leader of the Bari Rabbits now, just make sure they do everything right." Marshmallow stepped up and took the responsibility, while Teiichi told everyone, "When the guests arrive, you can play with them, then do whatever you want until then." 3 hours dragged by and still not a single customer showed up. The afternoon crept closer by the minute. Taikai knew his cafe wouldn't instantly blow up. He hadn't advertised hard, just posted a simple notice and waited. So all he could do now was pray the customer count would finally start climbing. Suddenly it hit him, this is exactly what it must feel like for the care owners who rent their help out. Right then, the doorbell blared, and it was like Teiichi had just landed his very first customers. And it turned out to be a trio of adventurers. Teiichi waved them in, and the lead guy said they'd spotted this place on the way back to town, so they decided to rest here. Then right in the middle of the cafe, the archer yanked out her arrow when she saw the berry rabbits, and a wolf and Teiichi instantly stepped in to stop her, explaining they were his familiars. She froze, shocked she'd even find monsters in a spot like this. Teiichi totally understood why she felt that way. And she couldn't shake the shock of it. How in the world were familiars even inside this cafe? Taikai pointed out that this was the fluffy cafe where customers could finally meet up and hang out with adorable, cuddly monsters. Customers, he stepped forward, introduced himself, and said he'd just opened today, so yeah, these were his very first customers. The archer lit up at the news, then stepped forward and introduced herself, Nina the Hunter. And then what about that other guy? He was Gris, and in the end, Ares was left standing. Teiichi told everyone they could order and pay right at the counter, but right now they'd be stuck with a strict one drink per person policy. While they waited for their orders, they could finally get hands-on with the monsters, and the seats were theirs too, for free. Nina grabbed the offer without hesitation. Before she even hit confirm on her order, she leaned in and demanded to know what made tea different from black tea. Taikai answered with a calm sip, saying the tea was just the green kind back home, his regular everyday drink, and man, it felt refreshing as soon as it hit his tongue. Grizz and Nana decided to go for the iced tea instead. Then Nina leaned in and asked what Ares got, and Ares snapped back, ordering the black tea. Taikai smiled and happily agreed, like, sure, and Nina even chimed in that they'd grab chocolates and cookies too. He pocketed 700 shells for each drink, grabbed 300 shells for the sweets, and when the dust settled, the total bill came out to around 2,700 shells. He told them to get comfy while they waited for the orders to roll in, and Gris, Nana, and Ares each grabbed their own seats, while Nana leaned in, staring at the berry rabbits like she couldn't believe her eyes. Since she'd spent her life hunting them down, seeing them like this finally hit Gris, these monsters weren't scary at all, just adorable, like little animals. Gris was dying to know that huge wolf too, but Luke's presence made him feel small, and just then Marshmallow slipped up to Nina. It left her feeling super awkward, because she was guilty since she'd aimed her bow at it earlier, and she didn't know where to put her hands, so she patted Marshmallow. Right then, Grizz was off playing with another berry rabbit, hugging it close and beaming about how much he loved holding it, because most little creatures bolt the second they spot him, and Nina just knew he had a soft heart underneath it all. Then Ari shot back, and Grizz was totally overreacting. Grizz insisted everything was fine, like he never got to catch something this wild every single day. Nina leaned in and asked Aries if she didn't want to play with those berry rabbits, but Aries shook her head and said she only needed a cup of tea and some rest. Soon, Taikai delivered the order of chocolates and cookies piled up beside 2 iced teas and 1 bold black tea. Nana said the lineup looked awesome. Grizz confessed he'd never had a green drink before, and then they went one by one to try it out. Everyone froze, shocked that the tea slid down so smooth, and it hit perfectly with those ridiculously delicious cookies. Grizz didn't buy it for a second, convinced the price was missing a digit, but Taikai stepped in and swore the prices were absolutely right. And the moment he saw they loved them, joy lit up his face. He even promised, "You can have more if you want." While Aries sipped her black tea, time just kept rolling. A berry rabbit darted up to Aries, and it totally caught her off guard. Harry scanned the area to make sure nobody was watching her, then she patted the adorable berry rabbit. And she adored how gentle it felt, too shy to let herself be soft-hearted. Aries whispered that she was only letting the berry rabbit use her lap, since no one was watching. Taikai noticed the customer had this unmistakable smile, like they were genuinely thrilled with the service. And it was seriously hard to believe they'd never run into the fluffs of this world. He figured once meals were served too, they could finally kick back and relax. But he was freaking out because he wasn't a good cook, and with his schedule wrecking him, all he could do was grab food from convenience stores every single day. Tesh figured, let's try something simple, and couldn't stop wondering, can he even grab packaged food just by using the shopping skill? He also decided to prowl the town for ingredients, and later Taikai swept through the market, spotting shop after shop stacked with fresh vegetables and all kinds of goodies. He decided to lean on his shopping skills to beg the cat gods for rice since this market had none, and right then Luke snapped, saying he was starving and wanted Taichai to grab him meat skewers from the food shop where they were grilling them up, so Taichai figured he might as well try too, because he was hungry as well. So he grabbed meat for himself, and then Luke shot him a quick order, "Don't forget mine too." Taikai grabbed 1 meat stick for Luke too and said it tasted awesome, so what did Luke think? Luke shot back that Taikai's food was way better. And it hit him like a lightning bolt. He finally realized something he'd never even considered before. Luke leaned in and demanded Taicha crank out another dragon steak. For now, he went to grab the ingredients, then jammed them into his magic bag. Right then, Luke caught a strange presence when a person walked up, grinning, and said it was awesome to see such a huge dog. Turns out the newcomer was Himry. She introduced herself, then immediately asked Taicha if that dog was his familiar. Taicha clocked she looked like a high schooler, but still he squared up and introduced himself properly as Taicha Tamer, and told her the dog wasn't a dog at all, it was a wolf, and his familiar was Luke. Mary asked if she could pet him, but Taichai turned to Luke and asked if he was okay. Luke snapped back and refused to be petted by a girl who called him a dog, and right away Mary understood. That was a hard no. Taikai finally owned up to it and apologized, saying that's just the way things go, and Murray just grinned like, "No worries, you're good." She'd heard some familiars could be a real headache, so she refused to put herself in their way. Taichai leaned in and asked if she wanted to pet a fluffy little creature. She could swing by his cafe, cuddle some berry rabbits, and he just knew she'd have a blast playing with them too. Himry nearly choked with shock when she heard that Taikai, the guy who runs that cute little cafe the receptionist bragged about, was actually him, Ignilia. She trailed Luke into the cafe and gasped. Everything looked warm and fluffy, like a cozy home instead, right as he stepped inside. She got completely lost in the cafe's calm, soothing vibe, like everything outside had vanished. She was obsessed with playing with the berry rabbits. Rabbits, while Taikai prayed Luke, could be just as warm and friendly as they were. After Himry counted the familiars, her jaw dropped. 11. She couldn't believe Taikai had that many, and it just blew her mind. Then Taikai shrugged it off with a laugh. She told her this place doesn't look like it's open yet, so was she really allowed to be here? Taikai shrugged and said, "It's totally fine." And not many folks were itching to pet monsters, so if you still roll out the welcome mat for fluffy lovers here, even with the time pressure. He figured it might have sounded weird, so he swore he didn't drag her here for any hidden reason, and when he said it, I laughed and told him he was funny. Then she brushed it off, "I'm stronger than I look," and drew her wand. Taikai immediately clocked her as a mage, and Himry introduced herself as an adventurer, quietly masking that she was the guildmaster. Then it hit him by inviting her out of nowhere. He must have wrecked her morning plans, and when she nodded and confirmed she hadn't eaten breakfast yet, everything suddenly made sense. Taikai heard her out and told her to wait while he grabbed something quick, so she kicked back to play with the little Bari rabbits. Himry took him up on that offer. Taichai slipped into the kitchen, hunted down the pasta ingredients with his shopping skill, then whipped up some Italian dressing too, and even busted out creation magic to conjure his own cafe-ready fluffy tableware. He boiled the pasta, heated the meat sauce in hot water, and laid the salad out in a fancy dish, totally loving how this place was turning more and more into a real cafe. After that brief wake-up, he burst out with the order in hand, saying she was clearly having a blast. Anne-Marie was sure she loved to mess around with the fluffy berry rabbits. Those little fluffballs looked unreal. With fur so beautiful, she'd actually feel awful for smacking them with magic during missions all the time. Taichai showed up, handed over the order, and told her to dig in before it got cold. Then he watched her with hope, and Himry practically buzzed with excitement to finally try it. One bite was all it took. Her eyes lit up instantly, and she gushed that it was downright delicious. Taikai shrugged it off like, it's nothing special, just standard pasta. Himry praised the pasta for its firm bite and the sauce for its rich, mouth-watering flavor, and right there Taikai felt proud. He thanked her, smiling because she genuinely loved it. Then he admitted he'd been thinking about putting this pasta on the menu, and Himry lit up, saying it'd be totally awesome. Plus the tableware was high quality and adorable, so it was bound to be a hit. Taichai thanked the crowd for the feedback, and right then, a few berry rabbits hopped right up beside her foot. Amiri asked if they wanted to try some too, and Taikai snapped back, stopping her cold and telling her not to feed them. He hauled the food for the berry rabbits, and they stared at him with the cutest eyes, like they couldn't believe he'd come bearing snacks. Taikai valued them so much it felt almost criminally unfair. Then I grilled him. Did those berry rabbits really snack on strawberries for breakfast? He nodded, spun around, and went to feed the rabbits, and I watched him carefully as he set the food down for the berry rabbits. Then out of nowhere, the berry rabbits sprinted straight for the food. The food was gone in a blink, and they were so locked in on eating that he couldn't stop staring. Those berry rabbits looked absolutely adorable chewing away, and Taikai even joked that he never gets tired of watching her like this. In that one sweet moment of calm, Emiri suddenly realized she'd been completely swept up by the berry rabbits. She couldn't believe she was so hooked on the berry rabbits, and that sudden obsession made her finally see how insanely fluffy they really were. Taikai totally understood how she felt, because he'd lived that same rush a bunch of times at cat cafes too, working himself to the bone, and still dragging himself over to feed those adorable cats he couldn't help but watch. After they stuffed their faces, the berry rabbits sprawled in a satisfied rest, and Henry swore he'd be back next time as a customer. Henry's words lit him up with joy, and he told her she could come whenever she wanted, anytime to bask in that soft, cozy fluffiness. Then she fired back, asking how much the meal cost. Teji cut it short and said her feedback was payment enough. Mary grinned and promised, just say the word, I'll come running when you're in trouble, because she was a powerhouse adventurer. Taichai let out a breath of relief and vowed, next time I'll ask for help for sure. Himry nodded, promised she would, and hurried back down the road. With that, she only wished him to take care, and just like that, Taichai was right back at work. He kicked things off by tweaking the menu and slapping on a pasta set piled high with meat sauce. Next up, he stocked up the cooking supplies and pushed his plan forward. Then Luke stormed in and begged Taki to whip up a dragon steak just for him. Taichai felt his breath catch. Luke asked for something with a shy, bashful face. Luke hated being treated like that, snapped at Taichai to stop insulting him, and Taichai figured Luke only acted that way because he must have been starving, especially after seeing Himry munching pasta. And a thought hit him hard. Maybe Luke felt lonely, like Mary was the only one he could see, just because he kept staring at her. After that, Cafe Fluffy finally caught a breather, serving good vibes and welcoming customers for a peaceful stretch. Among them, a merchant turned into one of his regulars, always sliding in to meet the whiteberry rabbit Manaka, then ordering his go-to, 1 green tea and pasta. Manaka's smile lit him up, and he felt totally calm and happy. Then Taikai suddenly spotted so many berry rabbits clustered around the merchant. It was wild to see. Taikai handed over the order, thanked him for waiting, and then the merchant dropped the real mystery. He had no clue why those rabbits were even drawn to him. He was so ticklish it felt like he was moments away from dying a sacred, dramatic death. And at that exact moment, Teaching spotted something that didn't belong. He leaned in and asked if the merchant had anything stashed in his chest pocket, and the merchant grinned, saying he had a few prototype cookies hidden there. Then the berry rabbits proved cookies were real, and they pounced on him like they'd been waiting for a snack. The merchant went wide-eyed and startled, like that hit him out of nowhere. And Teji snapped at him that feeding the fluffs outside food was against the rules, and the merchant hurriedly apologized, insisting it wasn't intentional. The merchant was way too pleased with the berry rabbits clinging to him. To save himself, he didn't share. He devoured every single cookie right there and then. As he hauled off, leaving the berry rabbits absolutely frozen in their tracks, Taechai leaned in and asked, "Seriously, are you guys that hungry?" Rage bubbled up in him, and he decided he'd whip up some snacks for them, plus Luke, sometime soon. He watched the poor merchant break down as every rabbit bolted past him, and his heart shattered in the worst way. Right after Taechai slammed the shop shut, he talked it out with Luke, laying out how he could upgrade things for himself, and for the beery rabbits too. Luke genuinely loved pushing to make things better for them, but he made it clear the real deal was what they eat and the environment where they train. And yeah, Luke can't stop bragging. The beanbag is the best, no contest, and Taki absolutely adored that sweet little scene. Then he stared at Bari rabbits, weighing whether to haul them outside for a real workout. But the berry rabbits started bouncing around like they were sending him a clear message. "See, we're totally fine in here." Taech invited Luke to run wild in the backyard, but Luke shut it down fast, saying he'd never be happy with a yard that small, and that he'd way rather go hunting instead. As he pictured the whole mindset playing out in his head, Taechai promised Luke he'd make time for him, starting right now, and more often than not. And just like that, Luke crashed into bed to gear up for his workout later, while Taki went straight to the real mission, food. He started whipping up a wild creation with strawberries and carrots. But then it hit him he was running out of ingredients, and among what he had one thing stood out, a moonflower. And marched straight to the Tamers Guild to get answers. So he headed to the guild, and Shelty greeted him with a worried look like she'd been waiting for him to show up more often. She clocked it right away. Taechai didn't bring a single tamed monster with him today. Then Taechai turned and realized Luke was right behind him the whole time. But Shelty just had to ask about the berry rabbits, because Taechai hauled in 10 of them in one go and totally blew her mind. Taechai peppered her with questions about where to find moonflowers, and Shelty flipped open a book, showing him exactly what they looked like. It could only be claimed at midnight, when the moon was out and the world held its breath. Taech's stomach dropped when she said it, and then she added, "You can grab them at the market too." She said they were sold in magic stores, and the closest one was only a 5-minute walk from here, so Taechi nearly forgot he was even in another world, and yeah, of course there had to be magic stores. Shelty leaned in and asked if he was planning to cook up something with them, because this rare ingredient was never touched by tamers or cafes. Taech said he was planning to whip up snacks for his family, and that's when she remembered Taech didn't just cook, he actually had real skills. A wave of jealousy hit her when she saw moonflowers getting chopped up for the ingredients. After thanking Shelty for the help, Taechai took off straight to the magic stores. Taechai sprinted into the magic store in no time, and spotted this huge store, so fancy it looked like it was built for nobles only. He didn't know if Luke would let him in, but Luke hated the thought of him standing outside the store. Then Himry finally burst in and slid right up to Taechai, greeting him like a spark in the dark. She lined in and demanded to know why he was even here, roaming the magic store. Then Taechai leaned in and laid the whole situation out for her, straight from the heart. Himry said she could just wait out here with Luke, and he figured it'd help, but he still didn't want to drag her into it. Himry waved it off like, "It's all good, I took care of you the other day, remember," and then she pushed forward, ready to help him this time. So she grabbed the chance and took her up on that offer. But Luke was absolutely furious about it. Taechai leaned in and ordered him to hang back here for a little while, and promised him an even bigger bean bag as a reward. Luke swallowed that idea and resigned himself. There was nothing else he could do about it. He dashed off, swearing he'd be back fast, and Himry told him, "Take your time." Once Taechai stepped into the magic store, he stared at a wall of potion bottles and tools, all buzzing around him as people swarmed the place. But he forced himself to calm down, no detours, no delays, so Luke and Himry wouldn't be left waiting. He scanned the labels on every kind of magic grass, and the price tags all hovered around 1,000 shells. And finally tracked down the moonflower with. It was 10,000 shells for a bundle, but he told himself that didn't sound too brutal. And started wondering just how many cookies they could whip up from a single scoop of flour. He sprinted out of the magic store the second he bought the items, and that's when he caught sight of intimidating Luke. His nerves practically screamed. He rushed to apologize for making her wait, then leaned in and asked if she was okay. I told her it was all fine because Luke was being such a good boy, but Luke hated getting praise like that. All right, it was time for Taichai to head home, and Himry jumped in to watch him whip up those treats. Then, later at this house, Taichai dumped in all the ingredients. And he tore into his cooking skills, whipping up the treats like a pro. In the end, he cranked out a mountain of cookies and tucked each one into little bags. And then counted everything down to the last detail, just to make sure the costs and the amount stayed perfectly on track. He was over the moon. Turns out those 70 bags of cookies came from all those ingredients, so now he'd better slap a price tag of 40 to 50 shells on each bag to get his money back. He told Henry he was about to hand Barry Rabbit some cookies, and Henry practically exploded with joy, because he was the one who got to deliver them. But the second she shoved out a cookie, she skipped the second cookie and instead devoured one all on her own, teasing Taichi so badly that she ended up questioning her choice, because one thing was clear, she couldn't resist it, no matter what. And man, those cookies were ridiculously good. Taichi can't resist, so he goes for one too. And right after, the berry rabbits came charging in, eager to taste those treats too. I'm pumped, they said she'll definitely hand them out. Then Taichai Erbluk barrels in, chasing the smell like it's a clue only he can catch. And asked for a few cookies, like it was urgent. Then Taki realized he forgot to whip up snacks for Lou. Himry asked Luke if he wanted some too, and Luke awkwardly nodded like he didn't know what to do with his hands. He tells them, for now, I'll roll with cookies. This is what my subordinates are already devouring. Taichai could tell Luke was just a little shy about dealing with people like Himry, because the man had been alone for so long. Taichai grinned, leaned into Himry, promised he'd deliver cookies to Luke himself, and told her to take care of the berry rabbits. Taichai told Luke the cookies were packed with carrots, strawberries, and moonflower. Then Luke squinted and demanded, "Where's the meat?" But the second he took a bite of those cookies, his ears shot up like he'd heard something incredible. Luke even admitted those cookies weren't half bad, and Taikai was thrilled he actually liked them. Then Luke begged for more cookies, and Taikai snapped back that stuffing himself with too many would make him sick. Luke tried to wave it off like, "It's fine, I'll just exercise," because he was a noble Fenrir after all, and Taikai finally had to give in. But Luke was so starstruck, he slipped his mouth over Taikai's hand. Meanwhile, Hmura darted around getting cookies for the berry rabbits. She was totally overwhelmed by how adorable it all was, and the second she handed them a cookie, she'd melt right along with the moment. All those berry rabbits would throw down the second that cookie showed up, every single one of them scrambling to be first. The other Gary rabbits would stare at her, like they couldn't wait for the next move. And Himry couldn't help but melt. Those adorable eyes pinned her like she was the only thing they wanted. Taichai and Himry had a blast tossing cookies to the fluffies and watching them gobble them up. Later, Taikai swung right into action and changed the menu to grab a bag of bunny cookies for just 300 shells. The next day, Aries, Grizz, and Nina rolled up with the adventure crew and hit the cafe. Then Grizz spotted the fresh menu, and right there, bunny cookies were calling his name. Taich grinned and told him, proud as ever, that now they could finally treat the berry rabbits with cookies too. Grizz and Nina quickly grabbed a single bag, and Aries was totally cool with black tea for the time being. And when Nina pressed her about it, Aries basically told her, "Go on, you're fine too." Even though Aries claims otherwise, the manatees still tag along every single time they hit the cafe. Taichai had warned Grizz ahead of time that berry rabbits were about to slam into him for those cookies, but he never saw how viciously the cute, little monsters could swarm him in the blink of an eye, and then they mocked him because his feeding time was over way too fast. She's going to love giving that cookie, one at a time. Aries stared, watching them munch their way through the berry rabbits like it was the most important thing in the world. A few days later, Taikai spotted Aries slipping into the cafe alone, no one with her, just her. She said she just wanted a calm tea break and shut down the idea she had any secret motive, like sure, she wasn't there to pet the rabbits. She ordered her usual black tea and chocolates, and with no other customers in sight, she finally exhaled. Then she sank into her book, stealing glances at the berry rabbits. And Sin Taichai showed up, ready to deliver her orders. She popped the chocolates into her mouth, chased it with her usual black tea, then curiosity blazing, turned to Taichai and asked where he'd gotten it, because that aroma was absolutely unreal. Taichai swallowed his pride, apologized, and admitted he got it through a buddy's contact. Ari realized she couldn't spill it, so she quickly apologized for bothering him and slipped back to her tea, savoring every sip. Then Taichai snatched up a brown berry rabbit like it was treasure, and then shoved her right onto Aries' lap, shocking her so bad she blurted that she only came here to read. Taichai assured her it was fine, then told her the name of that brown berry rabbit, Choco. Aries stared at her own name and realized it matched the chocolate she can't stop craving. And she flashed a tiny, clueless smile, like she was honestly savoring every second. Taichai clocked it, then stepped back and gave her some real privacy. Aries clocked it too. Taikai probably felt it instantly, like she really hated being stared at by anyone else. She padded up to Choco. She started wondering if anyone else feels this amazing too. Then Choco suddenly licked her finger, and she jolted back in shock. She figured that's why, because the chocolate smell must have gotten in her head when she ate earlier, so next time, she decided she'd try feeding her cookies. After that, Taikai locked up the store as soon as it was time to shut down, and the buzz he got for his fresh treats had him grinning ear to ear. Luke snapped and reminded him it was time to work out, and Taikai immediately agreed to join. But just a few moments later, he went from proud to instantly regretting it. Luke was tearing ahead so fast he couldn't even keep up with his own footing. Luke reminded him, "You promised you'd do it right," and Taichai had no idea back then it would get this brutal. Even though he clocked it instantly, Luke was ridiculously happy right now. So yeah, he's not about to slow down, not for a second. That's when Luke finally spotted a dragon right ahead of them. He looked them straight in the eye and made it crystal clear. He wanted Dragonscape back, and he wanted it again. Taichai's jaw dropped at how massive the dragon was, and he demanded Luke was he really about to kill it. Luke just grinned and said it looks tasty, so why not? So he shoved Taichai to wait while he went and hunted down the dragon. Luke instantly went into hunting mode and sliced through the moonlit air with a wind slash, targeting the dragon's neck. Taichai got completely derailed by that technique's name. And you can't forget the moment Luke chopped the dragon's head off like it was nothing, because missing that kind of effortless victory feels brutal. Taichai realized, again, that he was beyond lucky to have managed to tame Luke. Luke showed up at Taichai's door and demanded a dragon steak, and Taichai jumped into action and cooked it up. Luke chomped that delicious meat, loving every bite. Then he turned to ask if it was really okay for humans to eat dragon meat too. Taikai nodded and said, "It's totally fine. Dragon meat is crazy high-quality stuff for humans." Taikai went ahead and tried it just like that. And the second he tasted that rich, juicy steak, his eyes lit up like fireworks. And he couldn't believe it. Luke was even stronger than he'd imagined, and that realization hit like a wave. He was thrilled Luke was his first partner in this world, and right now he was even sitting with him at the cafe. Luke spun around with a bashful blush, looking like he couldn't believe he'd been caught. He admitted he only claimed that cafe as his turf because that beanbag was the best thing ever. Petri could tell Luke was totally rattled just by the way his tail kept wagging. After that, they tore into juicy steak together and kept the good times rolling for a while. Little did they know that a terrifying beast was about to crash their future. It all kicked off the day Himry stumbled into a cafe, utterly wrecked. Her eyes barely stayed open. Taichai leaned in, caught her order just right, cookies, and a steaming cup of hot black tea. But the second he brought the order, he spotted Himry already knocked out from exhaustion, so he snapped into action and conjured a blanket with his creation magic, wrapping her up so she could sleep as long as she wanted. She jolted awake out of nowhere, and he greeted her with a bright, unstoppable smile. Himry shot him a grateful smile and thanked him for letting her finally get some sleep. He finally fell into sleep, and when she asked how long, he shrugged and said it had been about 2 hours. I flinched because she only meant to take a quick break, and somehow she passed out and fell asleep for good. Taichai slipped her some chocolate to melt the tension right on the spot. She dashed off in a hurry, and Tesh guessed her job must have been brutal. After a few hours, the usual adventurers finally rolled in by evening and demanded Taichai straight up if he was gonna shut down. Taichi shot them a quick reminder that the clock still had 30 minutes left. Then, the moment closing was off the table, they wasted no time and dove straight into a game with Bari rabbits. Taikai leaned in and asked, "So what's going on with the adventurers?" Ever since that mage came around, Gryzen Ninus looked even more drained than normal, and worry gnawed at him like a storm on the horizon. They hauled Keiki in and told him, a Cerberus, over 3 meters tall, just showed up in the nearby forest. Taichai barely gave it a second thought, because hey, he'd already run into a Fenrir once before. Then Grizz and Nina burst in, shouting how massive it was if Cerberus even showed up, and they told him a terrifying story about how Cerberus once wiped out an entire city just from a single sneeze, turning it into a disaster-level monster. Taichai's stomach dropped the moment he saw the danger. He couldn't stop worrying that the monster might smash right into the city, and now he finally understands just how deadly it really is. She told him that Sir Ura's didn't look like he was leaving the ruins. Then she snapped, realizing she just spilled top-secret info, and begged him to keep it under wraps. Taichi shut her down fast, saying she couldn't go tossing classified secrets around like it was nothing. She told them the guild hid this on purpose, because if it slipped out, a huge panic would ignite, and it wouldn't stop there, it would spread to neighboring countries too. Taichi finally saw why Himry looked so worn out. Gris said they'd never actually laid eyes on Cerberus, but they could still feel its crushing presence, and they knew exactly why they couldn't beat it. Even so, they can't just let it sit forever, so the guild is already pulling together a strike force of top-tier adventurers over the next few days. Then Gris finally clocked the time, too late for comfort, but Nina refused to take the lead, because exhaustion had already started to drag her down. So Taikai leaned in and told them to stay, because he was ready to feed them dinner. Dinner because he wanted to thank adventurers like you, so folks like him could keep living in peace, and Grizz and his whole party made sure to show Taikai just how much they appreciated his generosity. And they totally seized the extra time to pet even more bunny rabbits. Nana lobbed a ball, and Minaka snapped it back in a flash. While Grizz sat there, one of those berry rabbits cozied up on his lap, because even though they're monsters, they've still been getting crazy attached to him. Right then, Takai swooped in and delivered the dinner like it was mission critical, and laid out dragon steak, creamy corn potage soup, fresh salad, and warm, fluffy bread for them. The second Luke caught that smell of dragon meat, he shot out of bed like a bullet. And he shoved his face straight into his portion of dinner, while Luke was shocked to see Luke get fed for the very first time right in front of him. And even after all that, he and the others couldn't resist diving into that outrageously fancy steak. They grilled him about what kind of meat this was, and Taikai just couldn't blurt out that it was dragon meat. They took a bite of the meat and immediately couldn't believe it. This was the best steak they'd ever tasted, and even the bread was so fluffy it felt unreal. Taikai beamed when he saw they loved the dinner, then they wrapped it up with tea and headed out. Luke asked Tyohi if they were leaving, and once she confirmed, he turned to Taikai and told him, "Come on, let's go work out." But Taikai freaked out and insisted they should stay inside and not go out. Luke snapped at Taikai, calling him stupid for thinking a Cerberus stood a chance against him, because the danger was right there, and it was no joke. So right then, he grabbed Taikai and marched him outside immediately to show him what he was made of. Taikai grilled Luke, asking if he was truly certain about this. Then Luke grinned and swore Cerberus would be a total piece of cake for him. Later on, Luke felt the Cerberus closing in, and told Takia he was pointing them the right way. Takia snapped back, "How do you know?" Luke swore he was strong enough to feel Cerberus the second it showed up. Taikai warned Luke that adventurers could be lurking nearby, so they had to keep their distance. Luke instantly understood what he meant. He meant it, and he slipped the hidden Taikai Sumer away. And he thrust his gaze toward the nearest band of adventurers. Luke didn't care a bit whether the other adventurers here caught sight of him as he tore into the Cerberus. So he stormed right in, bellowed at the top of his lungs, basically daring the sorceress to come out. And boom, right on cue, just like he thought it would happen. Then Cerberus burst out like the legends promised, and yep, it had 3 heads. The Cerberus raged so hard it matched every terrifying story people had been telling. And Taikai was certain it was even more terrifying than that dragon he'd seen before. Luke stepped up to Cerberus and faced it head-on, fear nowhere in sight. Taikai watched the adventurers rush in, desperate to report it to the guild right away. Right then the Cerberus hurled magic spheres at Lu, and Lu dodged them in mid-jump, blasting past their attack. It lunged and slashed at the Cerberus with moonlit claws, sending the beast tumbling through the air, yet it was nowhere near finished. Taikai couldn't stop worrying about Luke, because Cerberus looked way stronger than anyone expected. And he wondered what would happen even if they finally beat it. Yeah, he doesn't think they could eat it, but then he took another look. Taikai stared at that surprising fur. Man, it looked insanely fluffy, so he shot his hand out toward it. Luke snapped the moment Taikai stepped in his way, and he still managed to team it up in an instant. Taikai snapped into an apology and told them, plain and simple, he couldn't help it. Then out of nowhere, Cerberus's fierce bark snapped through the air. And he stared as that massive Cerberus shrank into a sweet little 3-headed puppy. Then the thing, totally calling Taikai their master, begged him to catch them. Taichai hesitated, then snatched up Cerberus, and somehow he fully understood what it was saying. So yeah, he fully tamed it and made it his. Taichi felt that warm, fluffy lift in his chest, like he was about to float straight up to the heavens. Then the three heads of Cerberus demanded names from him, and Taikai immediately started naming them from the left. He split it up with three slots. Left was Null, the middle held Pino, and the right was taken by Chloro. Taikai scooped them up above him, grinning hard as he couldn't believe how much smaller and how ridiculously fluffy they'd turned from the original. Pino swore this new setup was way better because it let them stay closer to Taikai. Then Taikai spotted the injuries right away. First, he blasted them with healing magic, only it would work on his tamed monsters. After the Sugarus got healed, they lit up and told Taikai he was awesome, but Luke couldn't shake this sinking feeling because all the damage he caused got patched up way too fast. Takai felt the pain finally vanish, and right beside him, Cerberus started to breathe easy again. Taikai squeezed in a cute hug, then Luke snapped, saying they had to move now. Those adventurers might wake up, because Taikai clearly remembered they passed out during the fight. So he hauled those adventurers straight to safety first. After that, Taikai stared at Cerberus and wondered what on earth he was supposed to do next. The very next morning, Takai jolted awake, heart thumping like something big was about to happen. He looked up and there was Cerberus, curling up and sleeping right beside him. He remembered hauling them home earlier, then he glanced around and there was Luke. Luke and Bari Rabbit crashed out on their beanbags, and man, Luke couldn't believe it. So many fluffs were already tucked in early that morning. And when he finally came to, he had a million questions burning in his head for Cerberus, starting with one. Why was that thing hanging out at the ruins? He still remembers Cerberus promising they'd never feel lonely again, which only makes one thing hit harder. Living by themselves for that long must have been brutal. He crept up on Cerberus, and then boom, one of them snapped awake. He apologized for waking him up, and that's when Taikai realized something wild. Only Noel, one of its heads, had actually woken up. Noel leaned in and told him the wild truth. Sure, they share one body, but every head runs its own consciousness. Taikai then asked Noel if he could have really brought them here, and Noel just shrugged, saying, yeah, that's totally fine. They kept dodging humans nonstop, because no matter where they ran, people always found them, so he said those ruins were their latest hiding spot. Which hit Taichai with pure relief the moment he heard it. He tamed them, and that's how he finally got to help. On the right side of the room, Chloro snapped awake too, and with a grin, he said he felt way happier here, confessing he'd always wanted to meet good humans like Taichi. Taichi, shaken by what they'd endured, listened close and then let out a breath of relief, proud he'd finally managed to meet Cerberus. He shot up, swore he'd protect them with his life, then ordered the servers to hold up as he carried their breakfast over. After a bit, he finally opened the cafe, and the very first visitors were Griss's crew, dead exhausted after they'd been dragged in for an emergency call this morning. They only meant to swing by for a quick look at the fluffies in Taichai, but Taichai caught a hint of his old work in that very company, like they'd called him in early back then, too. He told Griss and the others that since they were regulars, he'd hand out free bunny cookies to feed the berry rabbits. Then their exhausted faces lit up in seconds as they cheered. And Taichai leaned in and told them that starting today, they've got a brand new family member. Griss was thrilled, until Taichai called out Pino, Chloro, and Noel. The adventurers froze, utterly speechless, stuck right where they stood. They immediately sized up the three-headed beast, debating how it looked exactly like the Cerberus they'd been hunting, only to struggle because it was so hard to spot it here. But then everyone heard the same wild rumor. Cerberus vanished out of the ruins out of nowhere, and people swore it even crashed into a huge wolf-like monster in a full-on fight. Griss said Guild's research points to the Cerberus being dead, which means this dog had to be its kid. Harry finally snapped to the horrifying truth. Cerberus must have traded his own life to shield his kid. And just like that, everyone else nodded along, because they were convinced it all had to go down exactly like she said. Then Grizz finally pointed out that Taikai must have just happened to wander by, and somehow ended up taming the harmless pup without realizing it was a Cerberus. Nina basically said Taikai's a walking riddle, because he's got all these familiars and nobody ever explained why. Years passed, but in the end they realized it was all good. Taiking had finally tamed it, so there was nothing left to do. Taikai leaned in and asked if their discussion was over, then they nodded and said, yeah, we're done. Then Taichai showed up with food for Luke, Cerberus, and the rest of the crew. He fed Luke and Cerberus, while the adventurers took care of the berry rabbits. And just like that, with one more member joining the family, Cafe Fluffy stayed, just as calm and cozy as ever. Meanwhile, Guildmaster Himry prowled the forest, hunting for where Cerberus vanished to, and when other adventurers pressed her, asking if it was really as bad as killed, she refused to say it out loud because she still needed to see it with her own eyes. But now it was time to head back, and Himry seized the chance to turn the trip into a detour. As she sprinted on her way, she stumbled into a pack of orcs, and the moment they saw her, they zeroed in like hunters. They stared at her like she was their next target, ready to strike the moment they got the chance. Himry had zero time to waste, because she knew the only cure left was to feed the berry rabbits. So she snapped on her cyclone magic in a flash, to obliterate those orcs in the blink of an eye and move on before time even slips away. After she dealt with them, she salted the scene and wished these monsters were just as cute as those berry rabbits. Then she popped back on her way to the cafe, all fluffy and bright, and when she arrived, she ran up and greeted Taichai. Taichai said she must have been swamped, and she shrugged back that her work was basically handled, so yeah, she was here to have fun with the berry rabbits. But she froze because right there in Cafe Fluffy, a Cerberus was suddenly staring her down. Taikai saw her just standing there, totally frozen, and blurted out, "What's wrong?" He spilled what he knew about the new faces at Cafe Fluffy, Pino and Chloro, then leaned in hoping she'd click with them, but she was so stunned she couldn't get a word out. Taichai leaned in and asked what she wanted to drink, and she immediately ordered a steaming black tea. While Teji dashed off to grab the order, Himry couldn't shake the thought that the three-headed, one-bodied monster could only be a Cerberus. No matter how she sliced it, there was a surgeon sitting in the cafe, and Fluffy or not, she couldn't help getting excited to meet him. With a shaky breath, she plopped down and reached out, fingers trembling as she tried to stroke the Cerberus fur. She couldn't look away from Cerberus's fluffy fur, and she just kept staring at him like he was a miracle. She remembered the rumor, monsters that could shrink and swell once they were tamed, and she couldn't wait to see one with her own eyes. And yeah, Cerberus was on a whole other level compared to a berry rabbit, so an everyday tamer couldn't possibly control a disaster-grade monster, which basically screams that Taikai might be one of the best tamers on the planet. She couldn't help but wonder who Taikai really was, but the truth was out of reach. She locked eyes with him from across the room, and he could feel her staring straight through him. Then he grinned and spun around, just to find Luke standing there. He slid the black tea toward him, Mary. And she figured the cafe couldn't just vanish, so she hit the brakes, clutched her role as guildmaster, and stood ready to step in for Taichai anytime trouble struck, even from behind the scenes. The next day, right when the cafe was about to shut down, Luke and the crew jolted Taki awake for a proper meal, while Taichai got lost daydreaming about how he'd finally become the Fluffy's favorite. Luke snapped with rage, slammed his weight into Taichai, and Taichai shot up instantly. After he served them their meals, Taikai paused and wondered what he'd do next, because as soon as that thought hit, it struck him he'd been in this world for a while now, yet he still had no clue about half of it. So today, he made up his mind and stormed over to the Tamers Guild. As soon as he rolled up to Tamers Guild, Shelty greeted him like she always did. So Taichai straight up said he wanted to dig deeper into Tamers, and that's why he showed up today, because Shelty couldn't believe he knew so little, even with that weird non-familiar thing in his hand, but Taichai shrugged it off and blamed it on coming from the countryside. So she slapped a monster encyclopedia into his hands, and even mapped out where all those monsters were hiding. Taichai scanned the exact habitats of the monsters he owned, but Cerner and Lu had zero clues, nothing, not a shred of info. Taichai wasn't into anything else, he was totally obsessed with fluffy monsters. And just like that, his eyes locked onto something he couldn't possibly ignore. His face slammed into the book, and right there he spotted a cat-like monster lurking inside. Shelty leaned in and told Taichai it was a forest cat, and Taichai was absolutely hooked, hanging on every word like he couldn't wait to learn more. So she told him he'd have to cross into the neighboring country and hunt through a forest to finally find that forest cat. But if he rode in a carriage, the whole journey would still take about a month. Tesh figured if he rode Luke, they'd reach it way faster than waiting a whole month. When she spotted his excited face, she grinned and said a forest cat would look totally adorable in Taichai's cafe. She thrust a map into his hands, like it held the next step to everything. Right after that, Taichai sprinted straight home to grill Luke about everything they just uncovered. Luke, he shouted his name and yanked him out of sleep. Luke snapped, "What could possibly matter more than my comfy sleep?" And Taichai grinned, "I want to head to the neighboring country." Luke remembered it was the Asuran kingdom next door and asked, "So why do you want to go there?" Taichai grinned and said he wanted to tame the forest cat that roams the Asuran woods. Cerberus practically buzzed with excitement when he heard his friends were about to level up. Taikai told Luke that ordinary carriages would take around a month to get there, and Luke fired back that horse-driven carriages would. No match for the lightning speed of a noble Fenrir like himself, so he'll snatch Taichai and drop him there in an instant. He even offered to carry Taichai on his back, but Taichai hesitated hard, still haunted by what happened during the last ride. Luke fired off a question to Inwadley about that look, and Taikai grinned and said it was nothing but pure joy. He couldn't believe Luke actually agreed to take him there. There it is, Sir Era stepped in and said he wanted to go with them too, and told Taikai he could climb onto its back too, while Luke warned him, "Don't butt in, stay out of our conversation." And they should listen to Luke, because they've already lost to him before. Serger complains that it would be lonely if he stayed home. Then Luke strode up to Cerberus and told them he wanted them to guard the berry rabbits right here, because the only chance he had to ask them was while Luke and he were still around before they disappeared. The server got amped the moment it was trusted, then wagged its tail like it had finally earned the spotlight. Takai couldn't resist reaching out to pet that fluffy, wagging tail. And Cerberus ate up that kind of attention, kept leaning in every time someone stroked him. Taikai couldn't help but grin as that fluffy tail twirled around his hands and brushed his cheek. Then Luke snapped at Cerberus, telling him to keep his distance from Taichai and to guard the house like his life depended on it. Now Taichai's biggest worry was food, because Cerberus can't cook for everyone, so he might have to grab someone for a quick short-term part-time job. He stormed into the Commerce Guild and demanded the rules for boosting his employee roster. The receptionist just shot back that there were no surprises at all. And if he wanted, he could hit up the guild to step in and mediate, or take matters into his own hands and recruit people himself. She figured he'd need to personally recruit someone to keep the hired helper from getting rough with the monsters. Right then, Himry spotted Taikai and practically burst into a greeting the second she saw him. And Taikai couldn't help but feel lucky he'd run into her by pure chance. Then he told her straight up that he'd been thinking about hiring some short-term help. After she heard that, Mary shot off and signed on right away, because she'd have loved being with the berry rabbits nonstop, and Taikai was honestly shocked by how into it she was. Then she blurted out, worried she wasn't good enough, and she shot back that she might have trouble making it work as a kid. She brushed off the reason like it didn't matter, but Taikai wasn't having it. He believed it was everything. Then he spotted another young girl who looked just like Himry, right there in the flower shop. Himry told him it wasn't weird at all for someone her age to be running the shop solo. Go think it through, she's sure Taikai's place won't be packed with work, and Taikai agrees, because the only real headache Luke ever caused was going with him. So he swung the plan into motion, told her to follow him, and promised he'd spill every detail about the work at the cafe, and I followed Luke like I was on cloud 9. Where the berry rabbits and Cerberus rolled out the welcome mat for him. Himry couldn't contain his excitement, imagining she'd get to live this same experience too once she became an employee. After that, Teji leaned in over tea and told her he'd be heading out to snag a new fluffy, then warned it could take him about 25 days before he comes back. Mary leaned in and asked him, "So what are you gonna tame?" He shot back that he'd tame a fluffy forest cat from the neighboring country, and Himry loved the idea because that thing was insanely fluffy. But Himry blurted out, "So my work is only for 25 days. Taikai nodded and figured it sounded brutal for her, yet Himry was more shocked than anything, because she couldn't believe he could reach the Azurim Kingdom in just those 25 days. She told him that years ago she'd beaten a forest cat too, without ever messing with its fur, and now she couldn't wait to do it again. Now Taichi leaned in and told her, "I'll leave the moment Himry figures out the job." When Emery heard that, she laughed it off and said she was a free adventurer right now, so he could count on her. Taichi told her that he'd train her until they wrapped up the job, and while they were at it, they'd talk straight about her salary too. He laid out her work hours and the hourly pay, 10,000 shells for a full day. Then Himry fired back that it was way too much for that kind of job. But Taikai wouldn't rest until he paid the right way, so his family could be cared for the way they deserved. Himry swore she'd treat every one of them like royalty, because she's absolutely crazy about all the familiars. After that, Taikai drilled her hard so she'd be ready for the cafe shifts, apron snug on, sleeves ready to work. Which basically screams, "Yep, she works here." Then Taikai clapped his familiars into action and announced that starting today, Mary would be joining their crew. And now he leaned in and laid out every task for her, step by step. It all kicked off every morning with a quick health check on the familiars. Just watch how energetic they felt, and you'd know how they were doing. Himry realized monsters don't usually get weaker because they're powerful to the bone. Next, Taichi tells her to follow him as he shows her exactly how to bathe the familiars. He dragged her to the backyard and pointed out a shack that was really a full-on bathroom for all the familiars. Taichai told her, "Go ahead, help yourself," and pointed her to the towel and everything else stored here. And then, just like that, he led her straight to the bathtub. I can't believe it, the bathtub is actually there, even for the familiars. Then he pointed out the faucets that blasted out hot water. She stared and asked, "Okay, how does that even work?" But Taichai couldn't put it into words, so he swallowed his pride and apologized for using some tech from his own country. Then Luke finally snapped and slid into the tub for a soak. And Taichai practically beamed as all the other familiars piled into the bath with him. Then he grabbed her hands and taught her exactly how to wash their bodies the right way. But Himry jolted the moment he saw the monster bathing for the first time, and its fur suddenly went flat. Taichi told her that fur can look like that right after washing, but then they've gotta dry it the right way, towels first, no shortcuts. I can't stop thinking her magic would be way more convenient if it worked like this. So she unleashed her wind magic, and in the blink of an eye, every fur familiar went up dry instantly. Just look at how insanely fast it all got done. After that job, he pulled her aside and showed her the ropes, how to run the store and serve the customers their orders. As he thrust the familiars into the mix, one right after another. Training with her over, Takai packed up a bag, because now it was time to go. He ordered his familiars to stay put and watch the house while he was gone. Then he told Cerberus, Himry's coming by from tomorrow morning onward to the store. Cerberus basically begged, "Can we play with the customers when they show up?" And Taiking just nodded like, "Sure, let's do it." Then he plopped down to pet them, grinning, and swore he'd definitely snag a ton of souvenirs from the neighboring country. Then Luke shoved Taichai to hurry up, and Taichai finally rose to listen, still rattled by Luke's wild, impatient fury. Taichai apologized for making him wait too long, then insisted it wasn't his fault because he just couldn't stop, he loved them all. Luke totally lost his cool after hearing that. Taikai was finally set to leave, and Surgers watched him go, waving him off like, "Catch you later." Takai sprang onto Luke, aiming to hit the next town before the sun even rose, and he prayed nobody would spot them, because Luke's real size would freak anyone out. Taichai promised Luke, "No matter what hits us, I've got you, I'll protect you." Then Luke lined in and told him, "Since you're the weaker one. Taichai's got him, he'll guard him with his life." Taichai kept realizing Luke was rock solid, exactly the kind of reliable you need, while the two trekked through the night. Next morning, Taichai stepped outside and froze. Mountain peaks blazed with a breathtaking sunrise. And it hit him like relief, because it hadn't even been that long since he'd showed up in this world, after spending his past life as a salaryman with almost zero time for himself. And yeah, talking about rest, Taikai only got to duck into a cat cafe once a month on his leave. It all changed the day an accident collided him with the cat god. After death, he somehow ended up here, living in a whole new world. Then they handed him rare, one-of-a-kind powers, and even let him open a fluffy little cafe. Now he even won over regulars, living his best life running the cafe, thanks to the killer skills he got from the cat god. Now he studied the map for the Asurum Kingdom, where the forest cat was hiding, and if he could tame it, he'd finally earn the title, Official Cat Lover. Luke grabbed his attention and barked for him to hop on his back right away, so they could race to the nearby town and skip camping out. Taichai couldn't stop smiling at how kind Luke was. He hugged his fur and stared in pure awe, thinking, "This is insane. Getting the forest cat this fast is going to be absolutely amazing." Right when Luke burst into a sprint, Taki blurted that going slow would be fine, but Luke snapped back, calling him weak for yelling like that to slow down, and said that every time he runs fast, the weight in his chest finally lifts. Taichai glanced back at that breathtaking view and told them like, "We should slow down, just enjoy it." Luke told everyone he'd need to ready some goods during their break later on. Then bam, a rampaging monster chicken swooped in from the side and attacked them. Luke snapped it down in an instant, and Taichai slid it into his magic bag. Then later that night, they waited in a place where Taichai could feast his eyes on a breathtaking star-filled sky. Luke leaned in and asked if it was really that rare for Taichai. Taichai just nodded and said, "Where he lives, places like this don't show up very often." Then Luke shot him the reminder it was time to eat. Taichai cracked open the bag, fired up his cooking skills on the meat, then froze when he realized he was missing key ingredients. He yanked a bunch of ingredients out of the bag like he was about to start something huge. Then he fired up his cooking skill again. Soon, he had the monster chicken meat cooked into a totally mouthwatering dish, and promised Luke he could take as much as he wanted. Luke dug into that delicious meal and practically beamed as he told Luke his cooking skills were a lifesaver, then served up food so good it made Taikai's face light up with relief. Then he grabbed some and tried it himself. Taechai felt like he could demolish every single one of these awesome dishes, no limits. After more grueling travel, they finally rolled into Charmed Town, placed there by the orders of the Shulkuk Kingdom and the Azurin Kingdom. Taechai stepped into town and the packed streets screamed, "This place is amazing." Then I told him, "First stop, the Tamers Guild here. We've got to find a place that'll let Luke stay too." Luke leaned in and asked what he was staring at. Then Taechai grinned and said he was just caught up thinking about how magnificent his fur coat looked. Luke got flustered and insisted it was obvious, since he was a noble Fenrir. Then Taechai scanned the area and found them a place to stay, and Luke even mocked him for being weak just because he looked exhausted. While Taechai prayed he'd finally have enough stamina to keep pace with Luke as they moved around. Luke then leaned in and asked, "So what, do you really like the forest cats that much?" And then bam, Taechai suddenly snapped back to life and started talking, claiming he was being kept alive by the cats themselves. And the mere thought of getting to pet that cat lit a fire under him to give it his absolute best. Luke can't stop wondering what kind of battle he survived back then, and Taechai just has to joke that it sounded like a company event. Taechai couldn't stop thinking about how the cats were doing back at the cat cafe. And just like that, the day dragged by, and he couldn't stop replaying all the fun he'd had playing with them. Then Luke abruptly planted his face forward and started pulling the weirdest expressions like he'd lost his mind. Taechai apologized for it, but the sting of Luke's paw still left him feeling oddly good. Then Luke leaned in and demanded, "So why are you smirking like a total idiot?" And Taechai just shrugged and said, "No, Luke's the cute one." Luke shut down the noble Fenrir like that. No way he could have been cute. And he hated being thrown in the same group as those berry rabbits. Taechai told him you can't rank cuteness, and for him, every single one of his familiars was cute to the max. Luke spun away from him. Taechai noticed Luke wasn't just nervous, he was straight up shy, and that made Luke's whole act adorable all over again, so Luke teased him and told him to go to sleep right now. Taechai was sure he had the answer, and as Luke was winding down for the night, he wished him good night. That night they drifted off with one sweet promise. When morning hit, they'd dig into something delicious, and he gave Luke a quick pat before he finally fell asleep. After a while, they started roaming the town, hunting for ingredients to test. Luke even asked if they'd have dragon meat, but Taechai shut that down fast, knowing that was never going to happen. So he leaned in and asked Luke, "Why don't we try the wild minotaur's tail soup?" Taechai grabbed 2 steaming bowls of soup for himself, and one for Luke too. And you couldn't get enough of how delicious it was. Luke shared that same thought about the soup. After that, Taechai leaned in and told them to hunt down even more delicious meat, like they weren't done yet. Later, he joined the line at the border and pushed forward to enter the Azurin Kingdom. Luke demanded, "Why don't they just jump over the walls?" Taechai cut in, saying they had to do everything the right way. He didn't want to draw attention, just keep the cafe running quietly while the Cerberus stayed out of trouble. When it was his turn, Taechai clocked the exact moment the guard's face lit up with that stunned surprise at seeing Luke. Soon enough, he was fine with the guy, and he even praised his fluffy coat, so Luke couldn't help but smile, thrilled by that tiny moment at the gate. Taechai marched up to the guards, flashed his name, and declared himself their tamer. And flashed his guild card like, "See, this is real," to prove it. The guards let him through the gates only after they verified his registration as a tamer. And Taechai breathed a sigh of relief because Luke finally didn't cause a single problem. Now the guards were basically nudging him to handle it. And now Taechai was totally ready to meet the forest cats of this bright, Azurin Kingdom. Taechai rode straight into the Azurin Kingdom's legendary forest town Fallen, where he began spotting tons of toys shaped like wolves and other fierce beasts. And Taechai couldn't stop enjoying these artworks, so he turned to Luke and asked if he thought they were just as well made. And there was even one that looked just like Luke. Luke snapped at him, yelling, "Don't lump me in with those weakling wolves." Then Taechai shot back, saying he was only talking about what people see on the surface. The shopkeeper shot Taechai a quick question about whether his familiar was acting up with the toys, so Taechai immediately bowed, apologized for the mess, and came back to make it right. The shopkeeper brushed it off like it was nothing. Then he nodded, because he'd seen Taechai's wolf turn up on the spot before he even started carving. And yeah, Taechai's familiar looked like a way bigger threat, so you can't just group them together. When Luke heard that, a grin lit up his face, and the shopkeeper dropped a wild rumor. There were tamers out there who could actually talk to their familiars. For years, he finally asked, "Taechai, can you hear it?" And Taechai shot back, "Yeah, I get what monsters are saying." And right now, his familiar is absolutely furious that they got tossed together with those wolves. The shopkeeper leaned in and asked if he just rolled into the fallen town. Taechai only nodded. The shopkeeper told him, "Take the right on this path. If you keep going, you'll run straight into an inn called Forest Cat Stop." Taikai clocked the name and figured forest cats were probably roaming around, but he still panicked. Would familiars even be allowed inside? The shopkeeper promised him everything would be okay, because that place was run by a tamer, and Taikai's heart finally eased with relief. And Luke was thrilled to stick by the end, right there with Luke. Taikai followed the directions to the letter, and at last, he burst into the Forest Cat Inn, where the owner of the place personally greeted him and ran reception with the whole room watching. Taikai leaned in and asked the owner if he could stay here with his familiar, and the owner nodded, letting him. Taikai read the message and said he'd clear out a spacious room for him immediately. Then Taikai shot back his thanks for the guy's quick understanding. Then his gaze snapped to a real forest cat, right there, holding the keys to his room. Taichi's breath got stolen, pure shock slammed into him. The owner proudly introduced the forest cat as one of his familiars. "He told me his little sister jumps in sometimes, but most days he's basically solo, running the inn himself, so that's when he leans on his familiars to help him out." Taichi finally clocked that this was a legit cat inn, and he shot the cat god a grateful bow for dropping him here, so the owner just stared, baffled, until Taichi blurted that he'd come to tame the forest cats. The owner's eyes widened like, "Wait, why would you tame them?" Since they weren't exactly powerhouse strong and couldn't pull off any special magic either, Taikai looked him in the eye and told him plain, he loves their fluffiness. Once he heard it, the guy was completely stunned, but then Taikai stepped in and explained what fluffiness really meant. And he clocked it too. He fired up a compliment for Taikai, then introduced himself as Arts, the tamer who owned this very inn, and Taikai shot back with his own intro. Then Arts spilled the truth. He used to be an adventurer, but no matter what he did, he couldn't grow strong, so he had to take over that final end run his parents passed down. And since those forest cats were only monsters he could barely tame with his shaky skills, Arts just wasn't strong enough to earn a spot with the other adventurers' party. Kiichi could already see how that went down because cats had zero power. While Arch was talking, Luke stared right at the forest cat. And in the end, Arts admitted the same thing. His inn wasn't thriving either, just like his adventure life. Taikai couldn't wrap his head around it. Cats actually lived here too. Arch snapped back that it wasn't some happy accident, but a shameful tale tied to them. He promised he'd do his best to serve Taikai while he was staying here, and Taikai lit up with gratitude for the hospitality. He was convinced everyone in this world must be missing the urge to admire tiny little animals, maybe because they turned out to be monsters, but once people saw their charm up close, he just knew they'd fall in love with them. And on top of all that, the cats in this inn weren't here to hang out. They were here to lend a hand with Art's work, not to chase after customers. But what if they started playing with the guests? As if this could land in the spotlights and become exclusively popular. Art slid Taikai straight to his room, but the moment they started moving, Taikai blurted out, loud as a shout, asking why Arts didn't turn this place into an inn where people could mingle with cats, and it totally caught Arts off guard. He went on and dubbed cats the world's treasure, pointing to their innocent eyes, their fluffy coats, and their sleek, well-shaped bodies that just looked perfect. And on top of all that, they could actually stare at the flowers bursting across their body, like it was the ultimate flex, while Arts was sweating bullets. For a while, Taichi bombarded him with a ton of cat ideas. Luke's patience started to thin, and he leaned in to ask Taichi what he was planning to do next. No matter how adorable those little cats look, they're still monsters, and humans aren't going to just accept that nightmare with open arms. Taikai bragged that he'd been saving a secret plan just for this moment, and said he could pull it off the same way he runs his cafe. Taikai fired up his creation skill and spun a cat toy out of pure imagination. Luke blurted, "What is that?" and Taikai frantically tried to wave it in front of him. Nothing happened, so he decided to test it on cats first, of course, asking Arts for permission. Then Taichi caught the mouth-watering scent in the air, and his stomach practically begged him to hurry to dinner. Arts was cooking dinner when Taikai walked in, and she immediately asked him if he needed anything. Taikai shoved the item he'd made into view and asked Arts, "Can I let you play with the cats?" Then a scrappy forest cat locked eyes with Taichi and Nyod. Taikai's heart melted because that cat was pure adorableness. Then, right after he flicked the toy around, more forest cats came sneaking in. He was getting through it by keeping his hands to himself around the cats because he couldn't stand the thought of earning their hate. He tossed the cat toys toward the playful side of the cat and immediately saw it perk up, fully clocking what was happening. Taichi pulled the toy back, grinning as he decided this cat teaser had to do the trick. And just like he predicted, that cat pounced on the cat teaser and went wild. And Taichi grinned, loving the idea that the teaser would lure them in, and they'd rush to snatch it up like it was pure treasure. Art stood to the side, staring in awe, and blurted out it was amazing, because this was the first time he'd ever seen his cat's world look this happy. Taichai also admitted it was his first time ever watching cats react to his cat teaser with that level of pure, happy energy. Takai geared up, ready to dive headfirst into a full-on cat play session in that case. In those tearful moments, Taikai's heart cracked, and he vowed to make even more toys for the cats. Later, back in his room, Takai stared at the cat teaser, and Luke suddenly called it out. She realized he was looking downright slovenly, and Takai nearly jumped out of his skin. But he couldn't stop grinning, like he was up to something creepy. He decided to crank out even more toys, just so he could play to his heart's content with those forest cats. Then he leaned in and asked Luke if those forest cats could actually talk. Luke shot back that it was flat out impossible for those forest cats, trained through arts, to talk. But if you've got a crew of forest cats, their boss should absolutely be able to hold a real conversation. Taikai realized he'd have to break in an entire flock of wild forest cats just to find the one that could talk. Which snapped him right back to that wild talk with the cat god, yeah, the speaking cat. Taichi was right back in his head, replaying that wild conversation with the cats. Then Lupe yanked him back to reality and snapped, asking if he planned to start making toys right away. Taichi didn't even bother denying it. Then Luke tossed his worries aside and crashed into sleep. Taichai couldn't stop wondering if Luke was feeling lonely because of him. And once he realized Luke would need one too, he snapped into action and cooked up a flying desk using his creation magic. And Luke spotted it too. He fired a question at Taichai, "What's that?" And Taichai grinned and said he built this flying disc just to mess around and play with Luke. He said they'd need to head somewhere big and open. Luke said he usually wouldn't act childish, but when he saw Taichai went to the trouble of making it with his own skill, he couldn't help thinking, "All right, I'll try it." Taichai could tell Luke was itching to test it, and honestly, that eagerness was kind of adorable. Then right after that, he went and whipped up even more cat toys, starting with a bell ball and a dangling little tunnel. He prayed the forest cats would finally feast on them and love every bite. And the moment he tossed the call in front of the cat, it bolted after the ball like it had a mission. And he fiddled with it, totally hooked by his own curiosity. Taichai couldn't stop himself. He found it absolutely adorable. Luke snapped, "Go play with the flying disc first," and Tesh caved instantly, agreeing to head out right away. Right then, Arts burst over after hearing the commotion, and there his cat was, clearly having the time of its life. He had no idea his cats could pull off moves like that, and Taichai was over the moon watching them have the time of their lives. Taikai then leaned in and told Arts that customers could toss the balls into the cat, because anyone would love watching them play. Taichai pardoned us, but then he rushed off, because Luke was already hurrying, and Taichai had to go play with him first. Arts asked Taichai if it was cool for him to try throwing the ball too, and Taichai just nodded along. He even told me about the tunnel he built for the forest cats to run into and play. Arch felt pure gratitude, because Taichai was the kind of customer you dream of having. Taikai beamed back, saying it was his absolute pleasure to meet Arts. Luke Hayes and Taichai bolt out immediately to try this wild thing called the flying disc. Luke sprinted through the forest, then finally hauled Taikai into a wide open stretch of grasslands. Taichai knew this place was perfect, and he couldn't wait to bring his lunch here and hang out with the other familiars too. Luke bulldozed into his thoughts and demanded to know how they used that flying disc, and Taichi could tell he was buzzing with excitement. Then he told Luke to wait for a second, hurled the flying disc, and held his breath until it drifted farther away. Takai leaned in, grabbed Luke's attention, and dared him to catch the flying dish he'd just launched, turning it into a full-blown game. Luke couldn't wrap his head around the whole concept. His face said it loud, and Taichai felt uneasy realizing this wasn't even a game people knew in this world. He told Luke go on, try it first, and promised he'd instantly get why it was so much fun, so Luke nodded and agreed to give it a shot. And then Taichai whirled, then he chucked the flying disc like a strike meant to land. But Luke caught it almost instantly. Taichai froze in shock. He never saw Luke's strength coming, and now the disc choice is coming back to haunt him. Luke practically admitted it was way too easy, and Taichai was left feeling completely crushed. Right after that, Taikai ditched the old plan and shoved Luke into action, ordering him to grab the flying desk at the last possible second, right before it crashed. Taichai broke the rules down again, and even though Luke looked totally lost, he still leaned in like, "All right, show me." Luke challenged Taichai, "Would it look even crazier if I grabbed it right before it smashes the ground?" And Taichai grinned, saying it'd be way more fun. He hurled the disc again, like he couldn't stop the momentum. This time, Taechai and Luke both held their breath, waiting for Taechai to finally flash the signal to Luke so he could pounce on it. Luke trusted his instincts and sprinted upward with pure agility. Luke shot up and snagged the flying disc at the exact last second. Like always, he looked completely untouchable. And Taichi figured Luke was still pulling punches, because when he rode on his back, he definitely didn't unleash everything. Now Luke snapped the disc back, and Taichi couldn't stop praising him for nailing it on the very first try, because Luke could be downright cruel with his words, but he was secretly one of the kindest people around. And just a few seconds after Luke told him to throw it again, Taichi threw that flying disc again. But this time the disc shot forward for only a tiny bit by pure accident, which was basically nothing for Luke to grab. Luke shot him a mocking look like, "That's the best you've got," and Taichi rushed to apologize for not tossing it right. Then Luke leaned in and asked Taichi if it really was that tough to throw it. Taichi shrugged and said it was easy to toss, but getting it to fly far was the real battle. Luke tested it himself. He hurled the disc with everything he had, and it still plopped only a meter from them. Luke's pride flared so bright he refused to quit. So he hurled the disc again, flinging it with every ounce of precision he had. And this time it shot way past 100 meters, like, way beyond what you'd expect, and Luke swore it was easier than you'd ever imagine. And Taichi figured Luke's strength would make it feel effortless. Luke demanded strength, then snapped at Taichi to go grab it, since Luke had just thrown it, and Taichi groaned that he couldn't, because he felt too weak after they'd played for a while. Taichi stumbled back to the inn wrecked with exhaustion, and right then, he heard giggles and murmurs from a bunch of girls. Taichi couldn't help wondering who else might have shown up. Then he spotted some girls out there playing with the forest cats using the toy cars he'd built. Taichi realized those cat toys had blown past his expectations, and suddenly everyone wanted them. Arts pulled Taichi back in and told him everyone had been loving those cat toys. Then one of the girls leaned over and grilled her brother, asking if this Taichi was the mastermind who made them. Hearts nodded right on cue, then introduced his sister Lucy, and Lucy jumped in with a grin. She was running an inn and adventuring at the same time with her brother. Taichi lined in and introduced himself to Lucy, right there and then. Lucy stepped in, then brought along two more of her adventuring buddies, Marilia and Bianca. Marilia practically beamed as she played with adorable forest cats, while Bianca's heart softened so much she didn't want to fight monsters like them anymore. Taichi totally bought into the idea that the forest cats were absolutely adorable, and he whipped his head back to the forest cats still piling into the tunnel he'd made. He realized that if customers could actually interact with forest cats, it might work, so he decided to make the whole thing way more cat-focused. He figured letting cats freely roam around the guest rooms was a terrible idea. So maybe he should whip up a cat tower for them. And right when it mattered most, Taichi spotted the perfect empty patch on the wall and fired off a question to Lucy. Could they nail together a cat tower using boards right on that wall? He told her it was basically the perfect hangout, somewhere the forest cats could scramble up, find the high spots, and kick back to rest. Lucy nodded fast and agreed they could totally pull something like that off, and she made it clear she wanted to jump in and help too. Lucy said they had some wood stored away, so they could build the staircase on the wall with it, and Peiki asked if it was really okay to tweak everything at the end like that. She shot back, "Don't worry about it, there's nothing to fear." She wasn't backing down. She'd twist whatever needed twisting to make sure their plan ended up perfectly. And honestly, she didn't buy the whole adventurer hype either, so at the end, she decided to keep working even harder. Takai could tell she truly loved this in her parents left behind, so he decided to honor her feelings and pitch in even more. Lucy was totally losing herself in the cat teaser, playing with it like it was pure fun. Then Arts rolled up and told Lucy he decided to turn it into a spot where customers could actually interact with the forest cats, so he didn't mind a bit if Taikai wanted to build the boards himself, and Taikai was totally fine with that. He practically couldn't wait to dream up more ideas like that fluffy little cafe, one where people could watch their monster encounters come to life. Arts poured out his gratitude to Taikai for everything he'd been doing, then swore he'd swing by his cafe as soon as the inn finally took off. Arts shot out a handshake, using it to show gratitude and seal the friendship. Taichi beamed, took it without hesitation, and couldn't wait to jump in and help with the arts, everything staying safely under his care, just like that. Then he headed to the backyard storage, where Lucy was lining up wooden planks for the boards. Taikai complimented her, and Lucy just grinned back, saying she handled the wood storage herself, so she'd been practicing this kind of work for ages. She didn't want to dump everything on their guest, so she took most of the work for herself, and Taikai couldn't help but admire her kindness, because he could tell she'd been through a lot with everything going on. Lucy told Taichai she'd always dreamed of being an adventurer, but once she actually became one, fear started creeping in, and Taichai could see it clearly, because those missions put her in danger of dying every single time. He asked if she planned to stick as an adventurer for the rest of her life, and she shook her head, saying she hadn't even thought that far ahead yet. Lucy grinned, chasing the dream of striking treasure as an adventurer, all to make life easier for her brother, and Takai couldn't help but be deeply touched by how steady and trustworthy she was. And once the boards were done, they hustled right over to finish the cat tower. Luke caught a great nap, while Lucy and Taichai finally snapped every board into place, building the whole staircase pattern piece by piece. Taichai grinned at how it turned out, while Marilia taunted Lucy, asking if she was always a better carpenter than an adventurer, and Lucy snapped back hard. She watched as Arts trotted over to check the boards, knowing they'd be perfect for the cats to sprawl and rest on. He spun around to ask his forest cats if they wanted to give it a shot. The forest cards lunged onto the board at once, and in the blink of an eye, they perched there like lucky cat dolls bringing good fortune. Other cats rushed after the one perched on the top board, scrambling to settle in and catch a rest. But it sparked a full-blown fight between them, both clawing for the top spot. Lucy snapped, furious at how those cats sat on the boards, practically seething. Taichai leaned in and told her to stop fighting it. For now, just let it be. Arts then clapped like crazy to rally every cat around. They heard his summons and rushed off the boards. Taichai couldn't believe it. These forest cats were adorable Asterisk and Asterisk perfectly obedient, and that made him feel so hyped he worried he wouldn't sleep a wink tonight. Then Arts shouted that it was dinner time. And he called out for Marilia and Bianca to come join them too, because they weren't leaving without that stew. Well, it's the truth that hits hard. Hearts end up serving everyone, no exceptions. And over dinner, they opened up and talked like nothing could stop the momentum. Lucy swore she could figure everything out from here on out, all thanks to those cat toys. Taichai noticed Lucy's crazy gift for crafting cat toys, and now he's jumped in to help her kick off this whole new plan. Taichai can't stop counting down, because the moment he's back, he's ready to see just how legendary this place turns into. For now, he decided to tame his own wild forest cats first. The very next morning, he tore out for the forest, right away. Luke joked that they could speed up their work if they threw in some tasty bait, and Taki snapped back that they were here to tame forest cats, not slaughter them. Luke got the point, but in the back of his mind, he was really hoping to snag a dragon too, like catching 2 targets with 1 throw. Taichai figured Luke totally earned another dragon steak, because Luke wouldn't have made it this far without his help, though Taichai's still hoping Luke can wrangle those forest cats without hurting a single one. Right then, Luke leaned in and asked if they should dare to push even deeper into the woods. Taichai said they should push a little longer, because the forest cats were supposed to be frail and easy to tame, so they couldn't be lurking in the deeper parts, yet even after searching for a while. Taichai searched the forest and didn't spot a single forest cat, and that was downright weird, because the art guy kept insisting they were everywhere. Hey, she couldn't shake the weird feeling, and she started to wonder if they'd wandered into the wrong forest. He didn't trust it from the outside, he had to see for himself, so he cracked open the status page and hunted it down with his search skills. And that's how he tracked down where the forest cats were hiding. Luke spotted Taichi messing around and demanded to know what he was doing. Taichi shrugged and said he was testing a new skill to see if it could help him track down the forest cats. Luke blinked in surprise, saying Taichi must have had some rare kind of talent, while Taichi had no clue whether what he was doing was special or not. Then he caught the skill in action, pointing straight to where the forest cats were hiding, and Taichi stared in awe at how spot-on and clean the whole search was. And Luke got the heads up that a pack of forest cats was right up ahead. Luke immediately sensed something was off, because he didn't grab their presence at all. So he snapped his focus back on, and boom, he felt it. Stronger enemies prowling out there, enough to scare those forest cats into hiding. Taikai felt it could get dangerous for sure the moment Luke said stronger monsters were out there, and right then Luke pushed, "Let's go feed it now." Taikai felt crushed by his own sudden suggestion, and pressed Luke to promise it was really okay, because didn't he just say those monsters are terrifyingly strong? Luke blurted that he was a noble Fenrir, and swore there was 0 chance he'd ever get beaten by anyone. Luke said the strong monster wasn't just scary, it was a brutal monster from the forest cat's view, so they'd track it down and crush it next, and Taki instantly understood what that meant. He was going to have to ride Luke. So he begged Luke to go easy, like real gentle. Even Luke's slow pace was still too quick for Portisai, and once they'd pushed far enough, they finally spotted the monster they had to take down, only for it to reveal itself as a monster crow. Luke declares that the giant crow is a cowardly monster that only hunts and feeds on anyone weaker than it. Then Taikai asks if he can take it down, and Luke just nods like, yeah, of course. So he grabs Taichai's hand, yells, hold on tight, and then he leaps up to slam the flying giant crow. The crow snapped, freaked them out, then lunged and attacked without warning. Luke dodged it like it was nothing, then surged forward with his sharp claws straight for the weak crow. Luke snuffed out the crow in the blink of an eye, then snapped that he hates those monsters who prey on the weak. Luke told Taichai to stash the crow's body in his bag for materials, and for once, Taichai felt like Luke was looking out for him, like he actually cared. Then Taikai snapped his head toward the bushes. Something was moving, and it sounded close. He froze in fear, praying it wasn't another crow, and when panic hit, Luke told him, "Don't cower behind me, stay close, you're safe with me." Taichai then spotted where the noise was coming from, two monster ears sticking out, with eerie cat sounds mixed in. He blinked in surprise, because it wasn't just something, it was that pack of forest cats lurking behind the bushes. Taikai couldn't stop himself, he just had to pet that cat, but when it wobbled and moved with barely any strength, he froze. So yeah, right now the power was weaker than normal, and Luke guessed that cat had been hiding in that burrow for ages. Once the crow started circling after it heard that, Taichai shot off to feed the cat fast. But he couldn't decide what to hand it over, because he didn't know what would actually be good for a sickly cat, so Luke pitched in and said he could try giving some of those bunny cookies. Taichai cracked a gentle smile and inched toward the cat, holding out cookies like a peace offering so calm and safe, the cat couldn't help but trust him. Taichai nudged the cat with a reassuring smile, promising it, right there, that the cookie was safe. Carefully, the cat inched forward, sniffed the cookie like it was hunting treasure, then took a bite and gobbled it down. After they finally took a bite, the cats perked up fast and looked way better. It crept right up to Taichai like it had a mission, to thank him. Taichai couldn't help wondering if the cat really liked him, or if it was all because of that fancy title, the one loved by all fluffies. Either way, it looked like he could wrestle it into submission. So Taikai tamed the wild forest cat right there by his feet, and bam, named it Sakura. The second he grabbed it, he couldn't stop himself. He kept petting the cat because it was just unbearably cute, and Luke snapped at him again for that messy, goofy face.